Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone out there on the stationary plane. This is season 1, episode 9 of Static Plane Truth Live. So far, this is the first Wednesday show we've done, so we've got a whopping 0 viewers. I'm sure that'll come up soon. So at any rate, this is John the Morgile, and we've got a great show for everyone tonight. Just going from left to right on my little list here, we've got Brian. Brian, how you doing tonight? I think you're muted, Brian, and I think everyone is
Oh, I'm
actually.
sorry.
There you
Yep.
go. How you doing, Brian?
Yeah. All right. Thanks for inviting me, and yeah, it helps to unmute.
Yeah, no worries, man. So, and we got Jason. Jason, how you doing, man?
I think I'm unmuted now. I'm doing
There
good,
you are.
thanks.
Good.
Thanks
So,
for the invite, John.
yeah, and if you want to just, I'm not sure, I'm sure we've had you on before. If you just want to tell everybody a little bit about you, where we can find your stuff, what you've been up to, what we can look out for coming from you.
I've not been on before. Haven't added anything. This is Jason from Michigan, who talks to you on the phone every so
Oh,
often,
okay,
John.
Jason. Now I know who you are. How you been doing, man?
I'm doing really good. I've been
Awesome.
trying. The one thing that I am trying to add to the community is I have a really good friend who works for General Electric. He's actually a scientist, chemical engineer, probably one of the most brilliant people I know. And I've been having him look at this stuff. And he actually just texted me tonight asking me who this idiot Reds Rhetoric is that's going after Jeranism, who doesn't know anything about math or any of the calculations and has it all wrong. So maybe I can get him invited sometime and get his brilliance on the show.
Oh, that'd be great, man. Yeah, because Red's rhetoric until he eats his socks, he's got no credibility. So, um, I'm trying to think of a play on words for Red's rhetorics, like lacking credibility and a Pink's lacks credibility. I don't know. I'm bad at this. So anyway, but no, it's good to have you on, Jason. And yeah, I definitely recognized your voice. And now that I know who you are, it's good to talk to you. It's been a few weeks, but good to have you on. Thanks for joining us. And next we've got Lee. Lee, how you doing, man?
I'm
Tell
doing
us.
good.
Good, good. Tell us a little bit about you, what you're up to, where we can find your stuff, and what to look out for coming out from you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm basically a guy that got interested in flat Earth on a dare. And they told me, once you go flat, you'll never go back. And that turned out to be the case. And
Yep.
I've been in this several months now, probably just before the New Year to now. Well, whoa, we're in April, so a little over 4 months.
Yep.
5 months. And during the time that I've been in Flat Earth, I've stumbled into, and have formed ideas that help to open up new doors in thinking about what the Earth plane is and what the construct is. So I touched a little bit about that on it last week and would like to actually kind of embellish on it
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Go
a
ahead.
little bit more. And then my background is industrial product styling and design. When I went to school for it to learn how to design products from the ground up, I had to learn how to back engineer design. And so because of that methodology that I learned, I get to take that with me into this kind of research. It's been really a daunting task, but easier for me to be able to back engineer not just the flat Earth, but also how the powers that be have been distorting things so that we can't see what we're supposed to be able to see or understand, I should say. So it's been a wonderful experience and a lot of stumbling blocks too, because I can't get on air live on any shows. I don't have my own radio show. But now it's starting. I'm on your show, and this will be the 3rd time, so it's a beginning.
Yeah, man.
Basically about it.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you that when you look at this, and I wouldn't say that I looked at it on a dare, but it was something similar to where, like, I honestly never would have looked at it. I was very much entrenched and entranced in scientism, and this would have been the last topic I would have ever looked at, honestly. Like, I had probably seen some links on it and chuckled to myself, and I never would have looked at it if it wasn't for a friend of mine just mentioned it in passing, sort of telling me how stupid all conspiracy theories are, including 9/11 and the Boston bombing, and how all that's a bunch of, retarded conspiracy theory. And he mentioned, "You're not a flat earther, are you?" And of course, 2 months later, that led me to look at it. It was just that conversation that I ever would have even looked at this. And you're right. I mean, it just totally opens up new ways of thinking. We sort of have to throw out, I mean, we definitely want to keep our methodology that works. So you've got a good point there. I mean, if you have technical skills in terms of back engineering, whatever, whether it's a physical, tangible object or whether it's a theoretical model of the universe, if you have a method that works, that's great. But at the same time, we also sort of have to throw away a lot of what we've been sort of told or taught or sort of just take for granted, which can be hard. And it's like, even, I'm just probably right at a year into this, literally, like, almost to the day or to the week. It's been a year now when I would have first started looking at this with any seriousness, because I put up my first video May 1st, just was a coincidence, of last year, and I had been looking at it for about 7 to 10 days. So yeah, it's been just shy of a year, and I'm still having to unlearn things. I'm still learning new things, and yet I'm still having to think in heliocentric terms, because, and Brian and I were talking about this earlier, but we still have to, one way I put it is, sort of have to tattoo heliocentric ideas into our psyche, even though we know it's lies, but that's what most people believe. So we have to sort of play on that battlefield or on that level in order to be effective on that level. So anyway, not to get too much off on a tangent, but I definitely understand what you're saying. And one of the things that has been, sort of a big problem for me is gravity, or the observation of, what goes up must come down. It's a pretty simple observation. I don't think there's any flat earther out there that argues with it. If one were to step off of a tall building, of course they're going to fall to the ground and meet with the ground abruptly. And so nobody's denying the observation, what goes up must come down. The point of contention, at least for me, and we can expand on this with the panel, is that gravity is not a warping of space and time because of a curved Earth, warping this fabric of naturally rectilinear space-time, and space-time, essentially pushing back down in towards the Earth, like as a surface tension. That's where, I personally disagree with what goes up must come down is not caused by that. Obviously, the laws of density and buoyancy come into play, but anybody that knows their science will tell you you still have to have up and down in order for density and buoyancy to work. And so, Lee, this was sort of something that you had mentioned earlier you had wanted to talk about. I sort of think of density as a frequency sometimes when I'm doing thought experiments or even physical experiments, but you had sort of a different way of putting it, and so maybe if you just want to expand on that and anything that you were talking about in the previous weeks that you didn't really get a chance to air, the floor is yours by all means. And the rest of the panel, you guys, this is a round table, so don't feel like you have to, just sit there and shut up. If you have questions, let's try to be civil and let's try to let everybody finish their thoughts. But, questions, maybe jot them down, put them on a notepad file and save them for the end that way. Because I'm the type of person where if I get started talking about something and I get interrupted, I'll lose my train of thought, and then I'll never get to the point that I was trying to make. So I'm terrible about that. So we'll maybe try to save questions for the end of any dialogue. And so with all that being said, Lee, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, where to begin? Maybe I
Right.
should preface it with a thought. I'll preface what I'm going to talk about regarding the law of attraction that they're calling gravity, and I tend to believe it's something else. That I had to divorce myself from everything that I have ever learned regarding the sciences. That meant physics, chemistry, everything, even the words. So I took the word density out of this equation. I took the words gravity. I took out of it. I took this whole idea and concept that we're all being pulled towards a center that has a radius component to it. Just all of this. I had to abandon everything because what I wanted to do was clear the slate, start from scratch, so that I can reverse engineer this whole thing. And I had to go back to basics. So the basics that I took into consideration were the elements, because the ancient people understood how the elements worked in unison or together as a constitution of everything, that somehow this law of attraction and repulsion has to be defined or explained by looking at each of the elements and how they work with each other. So one of the things that I learned about engineering the way the ancients did it with these large constructs we call the pyramids was that, and it was demonstrated by somebody in modern times who built his own thing on his own, lifting large stones using sound frequencies, that's probably what they did back then during the days that they were building the Great Pyramids of Giza and so forth.
Now, are we talking about the Coral Castle or the John Hudson? Okay.
Coral Castle was built by one person.
Yep.
Can't be explained because he didn't have bulldozers and lifting mechanisms, and he didn't have any of that stuff. So somehow he did what the ancient people did based on theory, but apparently he proved it. Unfortunately, we don't have videotape of him doing it. Well, here's what I looked at. I looked at the granite as being one of the materials or one of the elements, these big granite blocks that lack the two other elements, actually the other three, which would be fire, water, and air. That the question is, ever in history, has anybody ever known sound frequencies to be able to lift a human body? And I think that the answer is no. Well, the human body has minerals in it, just like that granite stone does. But the problem is that a life form has all of the elements, kind of like embedded in with it as a constitution of that organism, and it's all held together somehow because of the way the forces are interacting with each other, and they're all equally important. That sound frequencies can't lift a human being, but they were probably able to achieve that within this construct known as the pyramid, which used all four elements but in geometric forms. Now I know I'm getting kind of carried away in something that sounds esoteric, but
actually, if I may interject something, something that I just found interesting that definitely dovetails into what you're talking about is bumblebees, big old fat bumblebees, technically can't fly. Scientifically, aerodynamically, they should not be able to fly. What they do is when they flap their wings, they actually create a resonant frequency. There's like these pits underneath their wings, and it basically creates a harmonic frequency with their whatever their shape or harmonic frequency level would be, and therefore it floats. And so nobody told the bumblebee he couldn't fly, so he can fly, but technically he really shouldn't be able to. So, and that is because of resonance frequency. That's demonstrated by bumblebees flying.
That's an excellent point, and I actually took that into consideration too, because what that would do is negate my concept of an organism can't levitate or create the conditions by which it would have anti-gravity. I hate using the word gravity now, but anti-attractive, going down to the earth plane principle, that the bumblebee may be constructed in such a way that there's water and air in the constitution, but not in the same proportions as a mammal, a fish, a bird. the the components of the bumblebee would have material parts to it that are devoid of the air and the water. That because of that, those aspects are in now the anti-gravity aspect of it and lifting the entire body as a whole up because of that resonant frequency that you're describing. So that's how I rationalize my, that to say, well, yeah, it can be done with a living organism. It's just that the way it's designed would have to be such that there's more dense of a material with a lack of water in it. I
Yeah,
know that didn't make sense, right?
well, just to sort of back up a little bit, and when we say things like anti-gravity, technically a helium balloon is an anti-gravity device. Technically, a 100-ton ship made out of steel is an anti-gravity device. But technically, we're just dealing with buoyancy. And so that's, pretty easily explained. But again, we have this fundamental problem of, okay, so if it's not a spinning globe, then what makes up, up, and what makes down, down? And again, I just think of it on, levels of frequency. The ground is a higher density, higher frequency, if you want to think of it that way. And so therefore there is this attraction of similar frequencies to the ground. So, we're denser than the helium balloon or whatever. So we don't float up or apples don't float up, they fall because they're denser than the air around them and they're a similar frequency to the ground. So that's sort of the way that I understand it. We don't even need the theory of gravity because the Earth doesn't have any curvature and is not spinning. But again, I'm with you so far that we still need to solve some big issues, like you said, the Coral Castle, the Great Pyramids. How were they lifting these ginormous stones? How did that one single dude build the Coral Castle in, like, what was it, a couple of weeks or something, with one pulley and a couple of kids or something? Right?
I'm not familiar with the Coral Castle, but I'm kind of trying to keep up with some images.
Well, I guess what Lee's saying is, and I totally agree, is that any object, whether it's a living organism or whether it's a hunk of limestone or granite, has a harmonic resonance frequency, and if you can somehow match that or equalize that somehow, then even a very heavy stone becomes just as light as the air around it, if you can, I don't know, sort of phase that into its correct harmonic resonance. Sort of like a bumblebee, but not.
Through vibration that you get a levitation dynamic occurring?
Yeah, because again, I sort of think that the ground itself is like, think of it as the deeper you go, the more and more dense things get. And I think that is supported by physical evidence. The big Russian, I forget the name of it, the big Russian drilling project back in the 80s where they tried for like 4 years to drill 10 miles or something, and they can only ever get down to 8 miles deep. And I think that's because things get denser and denser and denser as you go down, just as you have the inverse going up, things get less and less and less dense. I mean, it's really seems to me very natural, the natural order of things, but people need a scientific explanation for things, and so I think that I'm going to go with Tesla and agree with Lee on this, that we're dealing with vibration and frequency as opposed to necessarily physical matter. If that
Well,
makes sense.
I'd like to break in and
Sure.
sort of ask the question and then sort of give an opinion. If indeed there is a space station up there and it's at a certain distance from the Earth plane, and that it has to travel at a certain speed to create the conditions of what they call weightlessness, which they're defining as actually free falling, and I don't buy it. that
Mhm.
that they're also talking about satellites that are in fixed positions up there. And the question is, why aren't they being drawn to the Earth plane? In the way they describe it, why isn't gravity pulling it to the center core of the sphere? are these satellites at basically the same distance as a space station? What distance do they have to be in order to be fixed in one position in order to stay there without that free fall effect? Because they're trying to explain that free falling has to occur at 17,500 miles per hour, right? When they're
Uh,
really not. Uh, they're trying to explain it as sort of like a tethering to the radius of the center of the Earth to that distance, which keeps them in a state of suspension. In that, whatever centrifugal force is pushing them away, they would, jettison, is equal to what's pulling them back, which is kind of a question there, because what I'm showing or trying to describe is how can that happen with the fixed satellite? I'm not saying that they're out there, but they're saying that they are. But how can they explain why the conditions are different in both? It's what it is making their science look hypocritical. It can't explain it.
Yeah, and just to sort of answer like those questions with the conventional answers is you've got the low Earth orbit satellites, which are around 300 miles, so they claim, or I think the ISS is about 249, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And then you've got the geostationary satellites, which are around 22,000 miles high. And then you've got the highest satellites, which are supposedly studying solar winds at somewhere close to 250,000 miles high at its high point. But that very satellite is, the highest or the furthest distant satellite from the Earth at about 250,000 miles, is also the lowest flying satellite, allegedly at its at the other end of its elliptical orbit, where it comes as low as supposedly 180 miles, which I think is laughable and ridiculous. But that's the range of satellites that they claim, and I just have a hard time believing that they have anything beyond low
At what
Earth orbit.
distance do they have to be in order to be stationary in position?
They claim that if you're at around the equator, it's about 22,000 miles, going roughly, I think, 1,700 miles an hour or something like that.
That's way too far away. Are you sure that's 22,000 miles?
Yep, geostationary. Yeah, I'll go ahead and look it up on Wiki and confirm.
I've got a graphic up right now.
Yeah, but that's what they claim. I'm not agreeing with this at all. But the conventional narrative is, yeah, geostationary satellites, I believe, are 22,000 miles, something like that. Yeah, 35,000 kilometers, and geostationary orbit speed, or I should put velocity. Yeah, 3 kilometers per second. So that's 1.91 miles per second. So just do that times 60 times 60. Where's my calculator? 1.9 times 60 times 60 is, okay, I was off. It's almost 7,000. I said 1,700. So it's 7,000 miles per hour and about 22,000 miles high for the geostationary satellites.
Okay.
If I did the math right, I might have just screwed up something on the math, but I'm pretty sure I was thinking they went slower than that. But what they say 1.9 miles per second. So that for me, I did the quick math. That came up to 6,840, almost 7,000 miles an hour.
Okay. Well, that probably debunks my theory then, because what I was trying to say or suggest is that by breaking the layer, by going beyond the element that we call sky or atmosphere, is that severs the attraction of any object that would be attracted to the water beneath if we're discussing ancient.
Yeah, I just
principles
don't, I don't think that they're capable of sending anything beyond the lower magnetosphere. I've got some reasoning behind that. I think anything beyond the lower magnetosphere is faked. That includes the old Pioneer 10 probe that went to Jupiter allegedly. That includes the moon missions. I think that they do have some sort of technology up there that they're bouncing radio signals off of, but I mean, we've talked about it on a lot of different shows. They can achieve the same ends with weather balloons. geostationary weather balloons that don't need, hardly any maintenance. They're very cheap to put up and they're very cheap to replace. Then they can achieve the exact same ends as satellites would need to achieve. And satellites are just simply not necessary, physically impossible. And even if you could get something up there, what good is it going to do? You can't. You can only send radio frequency waves so far. Um, they attenuate into the background noise far, certainly well before 250,000 miles, like NASA claims. So, off on
You
that
know,
tangent.
you know how they, well, Neil Tyson actually described it this way. He used a basketball and said that like a grain of sand that represents the size of the International Space Station would be only a quarter inch above the surface of that basketball.
Right. Yeah.
To show the relationship. What is, you said 22,000 miles? What would the relationship be on a basketball so that I could visualize it?
Well, if you figure the diameter,
the furthest distant satellite out there.
Okay, well, figure the diameter of the Earth is about 8,000 miles, so figure 4 Earth diameters for the geostationary satellites, and figure 40 plus Earth diameters for the one that goes way out there to supposedly 250,000 miles.
Lee, can you see my screen? I think John's sharing it. So this is.
It looks like did we gain? Oh, and excuse me, guys, for interrupting, but we gained a special guest. We've got Edrique on here, and I hate to interrupt what we were talking about. So Edrique, if you can hang tight for a minute, buddy, we'll do some introductions. But I definitely want to talk to you, and we can keep your sort of identity anonymous if you wish. But I definitely want to talk to you. But if we could we'll stay on point here with what we were going on, and we'll get to introductions on with you here in just a minute, if that's cool with you, Edrique.
Lee, this is
awesome. Thank you so much for joining, by the way. And so go ahead and continue, guys.
Yeah, Lee, this is a graphic of the flat Earth based on the Gleason map. So at the center, we've got the North Pole, and this is going south at 10 degrees. It's 5, 10, 15, 20, and so this is 90 degrees south. Each degree is 69 miles. So at 90 degrees south, that represents 90 times 69, and what this dashed line is about 70 miles, which is almost 1 degree, a little bit more than 1 degree, and that's 37,000 feet, and I think that arguably that's around the maximum height where I don't think too many people would argue that this is achievable, but not by man. I think, what's his name, was at 100 and change thousand feet?
Yeah, Felix Baumgartner did the Red Bull from space jump at, I think it was 137,000 feet.
So again, using those type of proportions, that it would be 1/3 of this gap would be where, proportionally, mile for mile, for where the where satellites and objects have known to be going. So again, it's extraordinarily small, and we'll get into what all this other things are, but this is the diffraction of light as you go toward the equator, and it goes in this parabolic shape and to the point of where the sun is, and that gives us a height of 3,926 miles to the distance of the sun, and I believe that almost to the foot because it inverts what NASA claims is the diameter of the Earth, and all you're getting is an inverse of Earth on a flat surface to give you the distance. These are the same angles laid out, wrapped around a 3,625-mile globe. So all those project out at 92 million miles. And I believe numerically to the point that that's how they got the numbers they did for the sun distance being in the millions of miles. Because again, I'm probably not saying this very well, but the graphic I just showed you, this is what that looks like wrapped around a 36,000 or 3,626 mile globe.
3926. 3926.
3926. Sorry, I got it.
Well,
I got.
don't want to debunk the flat Earth because of no, I'm kidding.
Right.
And
You
I
know
guess
what they might be, you know what they might be doing is lying about the distances of these satellites out there beyond the International Space Station.
yeah, and that's what I was going to
Because
say.
I just did a really quick calculation to show that a satellite 22,000 miles away is 5 times the distance from the plane. It's 5.5. When you divide 22,000 by 4, which would be the radius as they consider the Earth to be a globe, as a flat plane, it would be 5 times the distance of the diameter if you were to sweep a circle, you know, like the Gleason map thing is. So that's pretty far away. So what's the purpose of that satellite if we can't even make a cellular call beyond 5 miles from a
Yeah, yeah,
from a tower? It's
totally
like
agreed
what's the,
that.
so
And one thing, I don't know if I've mentioned this or if you're aware, but like my grandfather, he was a civil engineer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for many, many years, and even back in the 40s and 50s, they were using, weather balloons and what looked exactly like radar dishes, as well as cell phone towers, to do things like long-term communications, radio triangulation, so like GPS. All of those technologies were available back in the 40s and the 50s using ground-based, tower-based, Tesla-based technologies that only the military was privy to because they actually seized all of Tesla's work under as if he was like an illegal alien, which he was not. He was a U.S. citizen. So to make a long story short, I totally agree that anything beyond 600 kilometers or about 350 miles is beyond the scope of our ability to traverse beyond that. And I think that anything that they claim that is beyond that, including satellites, etc., moon missions, Jupiter missions, Mars missions, all of that is just theoretical folly. It's never going to happen, and yeah, I think that they're just lying about satellites so that they can justify charging us $100 a month for a cable bill, $100 a month for a cell phone bill, $100 a month for your internet bill. When all of this stuff is it's basically freely exchanged information. They're just using the natural or manipulating the natural electromagnetic waves generated by the Earth. So that's really all they're doing. But they're basically tricking us with NASA, which, by the way, in ancient Hebrew, Nashah, N-A-S-A, means to deceive or beguile. So that's very fitting. But it just appears that they're using entities like NASA to trick us into believing that we live on a spinning globe, and to trick us into believing that we need to pay big bucks for things like cell phones and GPS, when again, the military had the very same technology in the 40s and the 50s when there were no satellites, using typical, radio frequency bounces like the Loran system and even long-range stuff with weather balloons. So with that being said, Lee, did you want to continue? Did you have anything you wanted to add or continue on with on that, or questions, comments, crickets? So, I hope I'm not cutting anybody short. If I am, if I could really quick go out of line here and jump over to Edrique, who's the newer guy that just joined. Edrique, if you want to just say hello and introduce yourself, and you can tell us as little or as much about yourself as you like, but at least say hi and where to find your stuff if you like.
Can you all hear me?
I can hear you good. Yep.
I'm not sure how this whole Google Hangout thing works. The first time I've used it, so.
Okay.
But I guess just who I am. I guess I'm no one important. I work with Dr. Kent Hovind. Been working for his ministry for 6 months now. Um, and about 4 months ago, he asked me to put together a video and do a bunch of research on the flat Earth thing just to see if there is anything to it. Because as many of y'all probably know, he's pretty dead set against it, but he wanted to be honest and take a look at it and make sure if there's anything to it. I didn't get into the flat Earth thing until November of last year, when my brother walked up to me and said, "Hey, the arguments about the flat Earth are pretty good." So I was like, "Come on, that's ridiculous." And I think that's where everybody starts.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I had a natural start to it, and when I got into it, thought it was pretty good. But I obviously had a bunch of questions, and so I just started doing experiments on my own. And I get in 4 months now, and I'm fairly confident that to myself I've proven that there is some kind of curvature to the Earth, at least in the experiments that I've done. So I don't know who on here would say that what shape of the Earth we are on, but if you had to put me in some kind of camp, I would definitely believe the Earth is a ball.
Okay, awesome, and you know that's great. And first of all, I want to thank you for joining us and for contacting me. And first of all, I want to thank you for looking into this because yeah, everybody. I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but me especially. The first several times I noticed this topic and was confronted with this topic, I poo-pooed it. I thought it was the stupidest thing I had ever heard of. But then, you know, when you actually start doing experimentation and actually giving this theory a fair shake, I've come to the you know, doubtless conclusion. You know, there's no way, there's no other conclusion that I can come to than the Earth is flat and stationary. Now, you mentioned that you've done some curvature tests. So what? Do you have any photos and some
Yeah, I do.
maps? Okay.
You can find it on my YouTube channel, Edric Visser. It's my first name is spelled weird, Edrique. My last name is V as in Victor, Isser. And if you go on there, what I did was I have a spotting telescope. I go shooting all the time. At least did when I lived in Texas, and so I had this real nice spotting telescope. I went out at Fort Pickens here in the Bay in Pensacola, and I was just looking out at the horizon, and I kept doing it over and over again because I was always out there fishing and always took my telescope with me. And so one day I decided to lay on the water line and put my telescope probably about 8 to 10 inches above the water line. And when I did that, I was looking out about 9 miles at this place called Pensacola Beach. And Pensacola Beach has this huge, big water tower. And on this water tower, I could see the water tower, but I couldn't see any buildings in front of it. So what I did was I moved up to a higher level. Oh, that is cool. There it is. So when I moved up to a higher level, which all I did was stand on the pier about 20 feet, I could see more of the buildings than when I was at the lower level. And so I found that to be real interesting. I did all the measurements with Google Earth, and what I found was that the amount of buildings that I was seeing fit within a certain range, because obviously you have that little bit of distortion there at the bottom, within a fairly accurate range of what you would predict from the curvature formula. And so that was really the one that kind of made me say, I'm pretty sure there is curvature, at least in Pensacola. And today I had some guy contact me and let me know that he's going to try to do the same experiment in Canada and see if he gets to the same results. So I'll post those as soon as I get them.
Okay, and one thing now, I actually grew up in Florida, so I know one thing about Florida is it's pretty darn flat in terms of, you know, height above sea level. But Pensacola now, I'm not too sure. Are you familiar? I guess there is some topography involved, but maybe I should pause it here because it looks like there is definitely some refraction going on there.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, because you don't see the dark blue of those big water towers. You only see the white parts.
Yeah. And so basically, what happens is once you get to a certain distance, especially over water, that the air near the ground is much more dense than the air. Well, it gets less and less dense as you go up in altitude.
Yeah.
But as you're looking sort of parallel to the ground, that very dense air near the water just reflects things back to you,
Yeah,
and
for
sort
sure.
of so you've got that sort of, I guess that's sort of like a simple mirage, a basic mirage. Um, and so you think that this here is showing the amount of droppage that would be consistent with 8 inches per mile squared?
Yeah, and the reason I said within a certain range is because you have to, I do, look at that little bit of distortion that you see, and I know that there is that bit of distortion, and therefore I say just within a certain range it does fit.
Yeah,
Um,
it's recommended to do this sort of thing. I'm not trying to be uppity or anything, but to do it either in the twilight, either twilight hours, as long as the sun is like at your back, because
yeah,
that tends to make it so that you have less refraction, the atmosphere is less excited, over water.
yeah,
Um, One thing is, now I'm not sure how many miles this is over,
that is
but
about 8 miles right there. Little,
okay.
probably a little more than 8.
Okay, so there shouldn't be really too much curvature over 8 miles, but one thing that, I've sort of been thinking about lately is, first of all, you have the operations of perspective involved. So that's always going to make taller objects appear to get shorter and shorter at a calculable rate as distance is gained. However, if the Earth was a sphere, you'd have to factor that in as well as curvature. So you've almost got like a double droppage effect if the Earth has that curvature. Now, over 8 miles, I mean, I guess I should bust out my calculator just to be accurate, but I'll just do, and I do it I know it's bad, 8 times 8 times 0.666666, and that just gives you the feet. So it should be 42 feet of vertical droppage from where you're standing, and it looks like you're not standing very high above the level of the water.
I think on that part, I'm actually, let me go back and check. I'm pretty sure on that one, I'm actually about 20 feet above the water.
Okay, so
I'm
you'd
not
have to
sure. That
subtract.
could be from the lower level. I don't want to be incorrect, but I think that's from the higher, from on top of the pylon.
Okay, because it looks like you're about level with the buoy, but I don't know. I mean, that is a very obviously highly zoomed telescopically.
Well, what it is when I use my phone, I get clear as day images, and when I use my GoPro, I don't. I don't. So I'm gonna go. I'm eventually trying to go back out there and try to make clearer videos, just because the quality on this really sucks. And, it just is, unfortunately, that. And I was hoping it'd be clear once I got home and made it bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. So this right here, I mean, and I'm glad you're doing experiments. I would say inconclusive because of you've got major refraction. I can tell right there the bottom half of all those buildings in front is actually a mirage, and so it's inconclusive. I would recommend doing that experiment multiple times during twilight hours.
Yeah.
Because light does sort of bend and refract depending on the density of the atmosphere and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you'll have better chance at twilight hours.
Yeah. If you skip to minute 3, let me check real quick. 3:48.
Okay. And I could have let it roll, but I can certainly skip to
Yeah, you
3:40.
can
I'll say
skip.
3:44 and let it play a second there and pause it there. Okay.
So right here is the one where I think is probably the best part to look at,
Hmm.
because what I'm actually looking at right here, and I don't know if you've actually watched the video, but what I'm looking at, and I showed in the video, is I'm looking over a 3-story building
Hmm.
that is 1 mile closer. That's only 8 miles away and that water tower in the back is 9 miles away.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. And is the water tower sort of like a blue color off to the way far left of the image?
No, the water tower is straight ahead of you. You can kind of see it mimics like
Okay.
a
Okay.
red on top and blue on the bottom. It's a beach ball, actually.
Yeah, okay, I see it. So one thing I see on this here now this is tidal water, like this is ocean water, salt water,
That is
like tidal.
Pensacola Bay. It's a bay.
Okay, so it's going to be affected by the tides, obviously.
Yes, it's
Um,
very affected by the tides.
Also, I can see maybe a 3 foot swell. It's hard to tell with the distance here, but you got to also think in terms of perspective. If you're closer towards the ground, say you're 6 feet above the ground, and
Yeah.
you're looking at an object that's very tall, that's off in the distance, but there's a 3 foot swell, say half the distance or a quarter of the distance to that object. That 3 foot swell is going to appear to cover, I
A
don't know,
fairly
what an
large amount.
eighth.
Yeah.
Yeah, like hundreds of feet. But that's just, because it's closer and the laws
Yeah.
of perspective. And so you really have to take all that into account. And it's suggested to, if you're going to do curvature calculations, it's obviously best to do it over water, from one end of water to the other end of water, but standing water is preferable because you don't have issues like the swells, tides, and even, water always finds its level, obviously, but ocean water and tidal water is always more choppy and wavy and that sort of thing. So, but I'm glad you're looking into this. I would disagree that now that you said this is over 7 miles.
From where I'm looking to the water tower is 9.5 miles, and right at 8.2 miles, there's a three-story building
Hmm.
in a direct line between me and that water tower.
And how many miles? I'm sorry.
The three-story building is like just over 8 miles away, I believe.
Okay, and we're not seeing any of it.
Yeah, if you skip to let me go find it real quick.
Hmm.
If you go to uh, 430,
Okay.
you can see the line that goes across the screen. That shows where I'm looking over.
Okay.
Yeah, so right there you see the line going across, and then
Yeah.
if you push play, I drop my little man there, and it looks at that three-story building. So that's what I'm looking over.
Okay. You're on the other side of that water there.
I'm actually to the left of it. So yeah, see how it zooms out? I'm over here to the left of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Um, So, and yeah, definitely one thing that you want to do is just make a note of your height above sea level, the actual distances involved, and the same sort of test. And I encourage everyone to do their own experimentation. I just suggest, again, just a couple suggestions. Twilight is is the better time to do it, and standing water as opposed to tidal water.
Yeah.
I just, if you can see a lighthouse over 55 miles when it should be, a quarter mile below the horizon line, that causes problems for me. And I understand the arguments are like, gravity or refraction is going to cause the
Well,
light to sort of.
those wouldn't be the arguments that I would use. I would use is how high are you above the water line? Because if you raise 8 inches above the water line, their curvature formula doesn't start until you are 1 mile away. Because then your curvature formula starts. If you raise up 24 inches, your curvature formula starts up 4 miles away. Then 74 inches, which is 6 feet, then you go to 3 miles away, and you have to restart the formula. So the
Yeah.
higher you go with the water tower on a on the curvature formula that we have, the higher up the water tower goes, or sorry, the lighthouse goes, the further you're able to see it. And then as well as if you are raised up higher in your observation point, the further you can see. And if both of them keep increasing in height, you're also going to magnify or increase the distance that you're able to see it.
Well, the lighthouses at sea are typically the observations are done from 10 feet above the sea level. That's sort of like a general rule of thumb. And then I think that they even use nautical miles instead of statute miles, so you have to convert that. But if you're talking about something that's 55 miles away, or just 50 miles away, you're talking about amount of curvature that should be a vertical droppage of like a quarter mile, almost a third mile. And if the water tower is, just a couple 100 feet tall, then it should be, an eighth of a mile or whatever beneath the horizon line. Um, we Jeranism, I don't know if you're familiar with Jeranism, but he did some laser tests over 4 miles that were sort of inconclusive, but
Yeah,
didn't
I saw that.
Okay, didn't appear to detect any curvature over 4 miles. Some of the stuff that you're doing here, I've seen similar things done with the Eureka Tower, which is one of the tallest, very tall structure. But when you have tidal waters and the water sort of bulging in certain places because of different barometric pressure and different heats of the temperature of the water and temperature of the air, it can cause sort of obfuscations or obstructions in your point
Okay.
of view. So let me
Well,
cancel that and go
how
back.
how high would you suggest, or how high would you be happy if I moved my my telescope up? Because right there, about 10 inches above the water. Um,
Yeah, that's the lower the better, really.
yeah,
But if you've got a perfectly flat, still water, that's the only
yeah.
thing.
There definitely are days. I was out there fishing. Oh, geez, 4 days ago, and the water was. I couldn't believe how calm it was. So there definitely are some crazy calm days. It's just trying to find the calm day with a
Hmm.
not so hot summer.
Right. And
Squeeze all that. And that's why I'm hoping for winter to come up again, which winter seems to last 2 weeks here in Florida. And then I'll be back out there trying to do them again because right now it's just simply too hot to go out there and try it.
yeah, yeah, I hear you, man. I definitely understand that. And one thing that I always just try to keep in mind is that, like, especially if you've been out to sea, I don't know if well, you said you've been sea fishing, so obviously, if you get up as high as you can, like on the top of the mast or say 14 foot up, you can see nothing but ocean all the way around you, and
Yeah.
just from horizon to horizon is just, it's an equidistant circle around you at eye
Yeah.
level. Now, if you take a weather balloon and launch it up 30,000 feet into the air, or even 130,000 feet into the air, that horizon level never drops. It remains fixed at eye level all the way up to even hundreds of thousands of feet, many miles into the air. And this is a big argument, I think, in terms of curvature.
Yeah.
Is with gained altitude, the apparent horizon should drop proportionally with altitude, which it absolutely does not. Um,
Well, I'm gonna have to disagree there that you don't see a that you don't see any curvature. Let me open up this link real quick on here.
mhm.
Have you heard of a guy named Five Red Pears? Posts a lot.
I'm not familiar now. Five red
Okay.
pairs.
He posted a video called Horizon Not Eye Level at an Airplane, and what he does is he took a theodolite app on his phone, and he, yeah, if you, yeah, let me see the link. It's Horizon Not at Eye Level airplane in an airplane.
Okay.
It's right. It's
Don't
right
forget
here in the
all
middle.
those airplane windows have curved
Yeah, convex.
glass, so
Yeah.
you're
Well,
looking through it just.
that
Go
wouldn't
ahead.
change at all the theodolite's measurements. And I understand it's just a phone app, but this app right here clearly shows that at eye level it does look like there is some drop to it. Um,
Well, and actually, what I would interject, not to interrupt, but I would say, you see that line, I don't know, I guess it would be about 2 degrees below the
yeah,
horizon line. You've got essentially that same refraction happening, which is, and I know, Lee, you've sort of touched on this. So basically, we have, especially when we're close to the ground, which in an airplane, we're still pretty close to the ground in the grand scheme of things. You've
yeah.
got this sort of sphere of of visibility around you, which appears to be a curve, and it also looks a lot lower. But I believe that if you take all that atmosphere out of there, the horizon level would be exactly where that line is. But unfortunately, we've got that atmosphere that covers it up. But I certainly don't see any curvature. That's a perfectly flat plane if I've ever seen one.
And
Well,
you'd have curvature going from left to right also, the bending up. You just don't, it's not like a tube where you're looking over the end. You're also looking at from span to span, left to right, there should be curvature also.
well, I'm actually going to say no, there wouldn't be because if you are above a ball, the distance to the point of the Earth that you would be seeing would be drawing a straight line around you in a sense because it would be drawing a circle all the way around you. So I don't think you would see curvature going from left to right. It would appear flat because the points on top of that circle would draw a straight line, if that makes sense,
Well,
around
they
the.
would to a degree, and I think that even at maybe 5 or 10,000 feet, that yes, that would apply. But once you get up to 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 feet, and we still see that same effect where, um, again, your field of view is basically like a cone going all the way around you, and the higher up you go, the larger and larger that cone or field of view gets. But there is a limit to it, and it has to do again with that atmosphere essentially just becoming reflective at great distances. So I think a lot of that is optical illusion. Now, just moving away from curvature for 1 second,
Hey, John.
I think a big part of this for me was the lack of spinning. And if we want to get into physics of this, we can. Physics is technically the study of objects in motion, and if the Earth was actually spinning on an axis at over 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, which is well beyond the speed of sound, yet spinning half the speed is an hour hand on a clock at the pole, and yet gravity not, having a huge difference between the equator and the poles, to me is very good evidence. There's tons of experiments you can do to prove that we're not spinning, but so far I've sort of dominated, and I'm sure that some of the other panel members would probably want to either respond or have some questions for you so far. So anybody else want to, anything that you guys might want to mention or
John.
ask Edric?
John.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment just about this photo I'm looking at. I mean, I was
Sure.
just on a flight. It appears to me that the wing doesn't appear to be flat to me. I mean, I just was on a flight to Vegas like basically 2 weeks ago and took similar photos. And to me, it appears the wing is up in the air. And I'm going to go back and look at my photos in that if the wing, it seems to me that the plane is maybe tilting away. It just doesn't
Maybe
look
banking
right to
a
me.
little. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It does appear as if maybe the plane is banking, but if those
Well,
indicators are correct, then it is at
yeah,
0 degrees. But
yeah. Even if the plane was tilted to the left, I would assume the theodolite app would say that you were not looking at zero. It would change its the elevation angle on there, because the app will always be facing at 0 degrees, or if you have it straight, it would be facing at 0 degrees.
The other thing I wanted to comment on was in regard to your photographs that you took or video you took of on the water. Um, I live in Michigan, and we are out on the water every weekend. And on a nice clear day, I can see, and I just went onto Google Maps and actually measured the distance out. The distance that I can see downtown Detroit from is 23 miles. There's a large building on the riverfront called the Renaissance Center, and on a clear day, not a hazy day, on a clear day, at 23 miles, I can see the building clear as day, and it just seems to me that shouldn't be possible. Going back to your conversation with looking at the building from your edge, so I'm able to see a building at an even greater distance, almost 3 times the distance that you can see across the water, and that's on a
and
boat
that should
in the
be
water.
over that distance. And we'll assume you're 6 foot tall, and we'll subtract 3 miles, and we'll just say it's 21. You said 24, right? Or did you say
It's
23?
23.4 miles.
Okay, so we'll subtract the 3.4 if you're 6 foot tall, and we'll just say that it's 20. And that's going to eliminate, that's where your line of sight becomes a tangent to the apparent curve. And so we'll just call it 20 times 20 times the good old 0.66666, and you get 200. There should be 266 feet of drop between you and those buildings, and 266 feet when you're looking over 20 miles doesn't look like much. It looks like a millimeter, but if you're talking about curvature and the building is less than 266 feet tall, then you shouldn't see any of the building. If the building is 500 feet tall, then you should see half of it. But you're able to see most of it, I would imagine, because you can see the same thing, the Chicago skyline from Grand Mere State Park. It's like 60 miles. So, again, I mean, I think 8 miles is I don't know,
And
especially with all that refraction involved. I would say that's inconclusive. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I've been looking at this thing for a year, and I really wish that I could be like, yeah, you know what, there is curvature and it's spinning, and thank God I can just go back to my normal life. But as much as I've looked into this and a lot of other people, and I know it sounds stupid and crazy, and I understand, like, okay, we're looking at the horizon. It's a little bit, maybe a degree or two below eye level, but that has to do with, I believe, the atmosphere refracting back at you. I believe if you could see through that atmosphere, you would see the horizon line. That's how planes operate, is with the horizontal gyroscope. They don't have to ever change it because the horizon is always level. Planes aren't going around a curve. They're flying level with the plane. One argument, and not to argue with
do you
you,
mind
because
if I chime in for a second?
sure, go ahead, Lee. Absolutely, yeah. Anyone,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I'd like to bring in two ideas. One is that there's a proof out there that that demonstrates that when you're on the beach of Kauai, looking over at Oahu, which is 90 miles away, you basically see the whole island. When all of that has to be on the other side of the hump, if there is a hump, according to the ball sphere. But
Yeah.
you see the whole thing, and what science does is argue against it by saying, well, there's atmospheric refraction. We got the formula, here it is, but it's all bunk. We know that.
Well, hold on.
So if I can
Well,
continue, I'd love to
yeah,
just
go
finish
for
my
it.
thought,
Sure.
and then I'll be done because I probably have to get off the phone. When we're looking at this picture here, it's probably a good reference just for what I'm going to explain. I did it last week. It was either last week or the week before, where what I suggested is that we introduce another frame of reference, and that would be another plane that would go up as far as infinity would go up and beyond, and then behind us. So it'd be like two planes intersecting each other, big X, but a three-dimensional X. And then we would have two planes of reference to determine whether there's a curvature or not based on vanishing point distances that our eyes can see. And then, of course, if we had binoculars or a telescope, that distance would be extended, but we would still see an anomaly occur, which would be the apparent curvature. I know that in this discussion you guys said, look at the picture, there's no curve. What I'm talking about is distances that are a lot greater and without atmospheric aberrations in the way it's hard to talk about it without actual visual references. But if you're standing next to a wall to your right side and your shoulder is right against that wall, and it goes up for infinity, we'll just call it that, and beyond you, in front of you, to infinity, when you look up, you're going to see only to a particular distance, but it's going to be an arc, a spherical arc, or a circular arc going straight down to the horizon, and every vanishing point up to down is the same as if you're looking at the horizon, but you're not able to see it as a curve because you're right there at the ground plane. But the further up you go, 100 miles up above, you're going to start seeing a curve. This is the way I'm looking at it. I wish I could prove it, but this is the way I'm looking at it, simply because in my theory, I'm saying that objects fall out of visual view, and what's beyond it, we can't see detail. It's that dime at 600 miles, did you say, John? It's just
Well,
totally disappeared.
600 times the diameter of any object is its vanishing point. I
Okay.
believe that's, and I never
All
did
right.
double check the equation,
Then
but I think
anything
that's
that's
accurate.
beyond like 1,000 times the diameter, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, a million times the diameter of anything,
Right.
then you wouldn't see the details, but you'd see the object, dimensional, geometric, two-dimensional object would not appear two-dimensional. It would start forming a curve if it's a flat thing. And if it's a curved object, it would be even more, it would be a different visual aberration or illusion. So the person that's standing at that intersection of now two planes, you have a horizontal and then a vertical up. If you go 45 degrees up and outward, see now you're rising above the horizon and you're going away from the wall plane. What you're looking at when you're seeing the intersection of those two planes to your right side as you're going upwards and to the left, you're just looking at where that is. From that point, going up and horizontally to your left, you're going to start seeing a curvature, slight, until you're 3, 5, 10, 20 times the distance from the Earth plane. It'll start looking like a hemisphere. The whole surface will start looking like a hemisphere because the visual drop-off of objects happen in your bubble, your frame of reference, according to the size of your eye and optical view and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's
that was my
very
theory.
it's very difficult for us because we're very teeny tiny observers, in comparison to the Earth is very large and massive and enormous and beautiful and mysterious.
Not only
Um,
that, we have a different depth of perception because of the separation of our pupils. The wider they're separated, the different they're going to be able to see things differently. The brain will interpret it. I just wanted to throw that in. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. There's always that. Now, curvature is something that is just it's so, I don't know. It just seems so subjective. Like this image here does it for me. If you're 20 or 30 miles up and you're not having to look way down to see the horizon, and it's basically right still at at that same level, then to me that's pretty good proof. But even that, you can argue, well, it drops off and there's the edge of the Earth, whatever. But spinning, again, that's a horse of a different color. That's a physical object in motion. That if we were spinning, and Florida's pretty close to the equator, you should be pretty much going eastward at about the speed of sound, and simultaneously falling around that curve at around, say, 500,000 feet per hour. Now, people argue that you're going to maintain your angular momentum, so you're not going to notice that speed and that velocity east, and I'll agree with that because it's a fixed frame of reference. However, the dropping is where I have a problem with it, because if you're zipping around a curve at 1,000 miles an hour or 900 miles an hour in Florida and falling 500,000 feet per hour, you're going to notice that. Furthermore, and this is something that we can debate, and this is a very good proof that sort of did it for me, was a flight from New York to LA is often identical in duration as a flight from LA to New York. And if the Earth was spinning east at, say, 750 miles an hour, that's being generous to the globe model at those average latitudes. The westbound flight should be much shorter than the eastbound flight, because LA should be racing towards the plane, racing towards LA, while the plane going from LA to New York should be racing against New York. And I understand, and I know the conventional arguments against this will be the planes were spinning at the same rate as the destinations prior to takeoff, and therefore the planes will always remain spinning, with the frame of reference as the destinations forever. And the other argument is the atmosphere is spinning with the face of the Earth, and so the planes, never leave that rotational frame of reference ever, even in the case of the westbound plane that has several jet engines attached, propelling it in the opposite direction as the spin of the Earth. And so that's a major point of contention for me. It actually has been since I was about 10 years old. But I've only just now realized in the last year that there's a debate to be had here, because I was shut down pretty quickly when I tried to tell my my aunt that the Earth isn't spinning. But now that we've looked at things like, for example, if you take a cannon or any kind of air rifle or any kind of projectile, and it's got some oomph to it, and you can line that bad boy perfectly vertical with a plumb line, and fire that sucker perfectly straight up on a still day, oftentimes the ball will land directly back into the barrel of the cannon or the muzzle that fired it. And so that right there proves fairly conclusively that we're not spinning. This has been done repeatedly. And if you think about, like, if you're on a merry-go-round and you throw a ball away from the merry-go-round, it's not going to continue spinning around with the merry-go-round. It's going to go at a straight line, basically a ray, away from the center of the axis. It might keep some of its angular momentum, but it's not going to keep its rotational frame of reference. And so same thing goes for the cannonball. If you fire it from the equator, it should apparently land very far west of the cannon that fired it. But unfortunately for the globe model, no matter what you do, the cannonball, if it's fired perfectly vertically and it's a relatively still day, will always land within a couple feet of the cannon that fired it, and often will land directly back into the barrel.
I got a question for you. Ready?
Sure.
If a human being, 180 to 200, well, just round it up to 200 pounds, standing on either pole, that's assuming that the Earth is a ball, according to them, that the weight of that person would be the same at the equator regardless of whether there's a bulge. It would be nominal if the Earth is not spinning. That if the Earth is spinning, according to them, at 1,040 miles per hour, wouldn't centripetal forces at 1,000 miles per hour be reducing weight of that 200-pound person by a couple of pounds, several pounds, or whatever? I don't know how to do math. I can't even.
Well, that's actually a very good point. So let me give you an example. Take two 1-pound weights and hold one in each hand and stretch your arms out to your sides and spin around. Well, you're going to feel those 1-pound weights tugging out on your arms. Now take two 10-pound weights and spin at the exact same speed, and the outward force is going to be more with the 10-pound weights. That's just how centripetal force works, or centrifugal force, whatever the hell it is. But it's the outward thrust generated by a spinning object. Now, technically, at least at the equator, the more mass you add to an object, the lighter and lighter it should get.
That's right. So what's their argument out of that?
Well,
how do they argue out of that one?
Should I explain it for you guys?
Well, I wouldn't be
I don't know that I can, but I could try.
I wouldn't be as condescending as to try to say explain it, but I'd love to hear an argument against it.
Yeah, well, there's quite a couple things I've been wanting to say. The first one is when we say that the Earth is spinning at the equator at 1,000 miles per hour, you can't measure the speed of a spinning ball using linear measurements, meaning miles per hour is the change of distance over change of time. What you actually do to measure the speed of a spinning object is use the speed of angle over the change of time, which would be 15 degrees an hour. And when you calculate that out, you get a speed of 0.03 meters per second per second. So if you take that same equation and put it on a 3-meter size merry-go-round, and you change 0.03 meters per second, the merry-go-round is only spinning at 1 revolution every 2 minutes, every 120 seconds. So it wouldn't change the weight at any dramatic amount. It wouldn't change the weight at a huge dramatic amount from the equator versus the center. I would say that there is a very, very small difference in the.
So wait a minute. So wait. You're arguing, and I'm not to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear that you're arguing that there wouldn't be much difference between zipping around a curve with a radius of 4,000 miles as the radius of curvature.
Yeah.
Traveling 1,037.5 miles an hour, dropping around that curve, standing perpendicular to the axis at 700,000 feet per hour. That's vertical drop. Yeah. You're saying that there wouldn't be much difference between that and standing on top of, parallel with the axis, and not spinning at all?
Well, but
you got to show the numbers to prove it. I'm not going to buy the argument until I see those numbers.
Okay. I do have.
No, the numbers, I've seen the numbers, and what they've done, the globe Earth tactics are very tricky indeed. They'll take observations, and the observations will be true and correct, and they will take those observations and cram them into the heliocentric theory. And so, like, let's say you weigh a ton of coffee at the equator and weigh that same ton of coffee at the North Pole, it's going to weigh a little bit more at the North Pole. Now, I will mention that this is, by the way, consistent with the barometric pressure of the Earth. The barometric pressure is the highest in the north and the lowest in the far south. So you have a gradient decrease in barometric pressure from north to south, whatever model you're using. And this works very nicely in a flat Earth model. However, it's not explained very well in the globe Earth model. But the point of all this is that this whole contention that spinning perpendicular to the axis, going 1,037.5 miles an hour, dropping around that curve at 700,000 feet per hour would be it would be the most wild roller coaster ride you've ever been on, and from day to night would be inverse opposites. So let's say it's 12 o'clock midnight, the Earth is racing up towards your feet. We're talking about orbiting the sun now at 66,600 miles an hour, coming up towards your feet at, say, 12 midnight, and then at 12 noon, these are probably bad examples, we'll say 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., but 12 hours later, the Earth is racing down away from your feet at 66,600 miles an hour, and it would be a phase of everything in between from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So just the amount of, zipping around a curve and flying through space, and I know this all sounds very subjective, but there's no evidence for this. It's just theoretical. When you do physical experiments to try to prove spinning or axial rotation, if you will, there is none. It's just theoretical. I mean, the numbers, you can make the numbers work. You can make math work.
Well, let's scale it up a little bit. Let's say we're the size of Jupiter, which is huge.
Yeah,
with
and that's
this 200-pound body. How
so
much?
we're going in a heliocentric model, and we'll just assume that Jupiter is what they say it is, that giant ball of gas.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a solid thing, and you could stand on it at the pole where it's spinning. How much weight would be taken off of a 200-pound body?
Well,
The
see, that's the
difference if
thing.
it's spinning not at 1,000, but let's say it's a different speed, either short. But what I'm talking about is that there is a distance from the center to the surface plane, which is a lot greater than what they call the Earth being a ball is, the radius, right? It can't be. I'm just showing a comparison here to think about, to prove that
Well, and I think, one
that
thing.
we do not live on a spinning ball.
And I think that perhaps, and I know, Brian, you've been very patient and quiet for this show, and to introduce you, is it okay if I call you Ed, or is it Edric? I'm so sorry.
You can call me Billy Bob if you don't like to pronounce Edric. I don't care what you call me.
I just wanted to make sure I had it right. So it is Edric, and I'm so sorry for that. But Brian is a civil engineer. He went to Purdue, and he worked as well. He can tell you about his background, but he's been doing some in-depth research into eclipses using NASA's numbers, using time and date numbers, and we've run into some issues with the globe model. And so maybe, Brian, if you want to take the talking stick a little bit, and I'll go ahead and allow you to present. That way you can maybe show Edric what you've been working on, because it's very intriguing, and I think it's good to sort of show it to somebody that's looking at this for the first time. Maybe it'll be a linchpin, who knows.
Well, I just want to apologize. That one comment that I made that you said shouldn't sound so condescending, I did not mean it that way. I probably should have watched my words a little clearer, so I just want to apologize if I
No,
did.
John was apologizing for himself. I just want to catch that John was apologizing for himself, because I know how meticulous he is when
No. I'm touchy because, I don't know. I've been doing this for a year, and people try to explain things to me that I fully understand, and a lot of times people try to explain things to me and they've got it backwards. And so, and I that was rude of me, and I accept and appreciate your apology. No hard feelings. It's all good.
I feel a lot worse because I usually try to be as cordial as I can, and I was like, dang it, I'm not happy that I said that, but yeah.
You're fine. It's all good, man. Really, no worries.
Then I was right that John was being rude.
I was
Sorry.
being rude. I was being an asshole. Sorry.
uh, anyway, good point to jump in. Um, for Enrique's benefit, I'll just try and give a little bit background of the analysis that was done looking at solar eclipse data and also lunar eclipse data. But for solar eclipse, we looked at about 46 events. And just for reference, the solar eclipse is where you've got the sun, the moon, and the earth. And that's the casting of the shadow of the moon on the face of the earth that leaves a trajectory. And as I try and fumble through here,
And while you're pulling those graphics
yeah,
up, essentially the crux of this is, and you know, eclipses are fascinating. For me, as a globe earther for the majority of my life, I'm 35, and so I've been a globe earther for 34 years, say 90% of my life or more. Um, I've just always been sort of fascinated with eclipses, but I never really studied them much. I always sort of assumed that solar eclipses were very rare and, you know, very mysterious, and that lunar eclipses were probably much more frequent because of you know, the situation going on. But I was really astonished to find that over a 100-year period, solar and lunar eclipses are equally as likely or equally as rare. There was about 130 lunar, 128 solar. That's over 1900 to 2000. So they are just about equally as frequent. So I thought that was very sort of astonishing. But Brian's even taken it a step further, because I started looking into this and it was just out of my league. Luckily, you know, he's got the patience to go through each and every one of these eclipse events, and he found some really damning evidence against the globe model that involved the signatures of the solar eclipses, especially where you've got basically an alignment of the sun, moon, earth. Or if you're standing on the earth, it goes, you know, you, observer, then the moon, then the sun. That's the order for solar eclipses, obviously. But that the moon actually acts like sort of a stylus and creates sort of a signature across the earth. And all these squiggly lines that you're looking at here are actually signature patterns of many, many different eclipses that Brian has profiled
That's cool.
um, over the last few months. Now, the ones that are a big issue for the heliocentric model are the ones that are way far in the southern hemisphere and way far in the northern hemisphere that actually traverse the poles, if I'm saying that right. But so Brian, do you have your graphics up where you needed them?
yeah.
Okay.
If you're kind of following what John was saying, is that this is now I'm going to talk from here on out with the globe Earth model, so
Yeah.
everything's in reference to that. So this is what they are indicating is occurring, that you have the range of the moon going from 23.4 north to 23.4 south. So that is the trajectory as you look on the Mercator map. The sun and moon pass. Oh, I wiped out the other one. Hold on.
Mhm. And I think the Mercator projection and the newer one, which is the Peters projection, are, I'm not sure how far along you are into studying this, but they're basically cylindrical conformal maps that use latitude and longitude lines, which are based on solar observations, which have been very meticulously measured and documented in the northern hemisphere, but have only been assumed and extrapolated and never measured and confirmed everywhere in the southern hemisphere. And so, you know, there's just a lot of assumptions involved with the spherical Earth model, and what we're finding is that a closer, more local sun and moon appear to be casting these um, signatures, these ecliptic signatures across the face of the Earth. But maybe Brian, you could explain it a little bit better in terms of the ones that hit the poles, because it's just
Right.
kind of freaky deaky once you get it.
This is what I'm trying to indicate is that the green is the equator, the dotted line is the, well, more graphically correct, is around 23.4 north and 23.4 south. Now I'm a little bit off because I just did this real quick, but that on the globe model is 23.4 north, 23.4 south, and here's the equator. Now that indicates as the sun is allegedly 92 to 93 million miles away, that you have a wall, essentially a wall of light coming in. That's horizontal, for lack of a better description. It's not like this because proportionately, if the sun was 1 inch, this would be a dot 8 feet away or almost 9 feet away. If you go one sun diameter equals 1 inch, or 1 million miles is 1 inch, the sun is 0.865 inches in diameter, and the moon or the sun, the Earth is 92 inches away, and it's a pinpoint, and the moon is smaller than a pinpoint.
Right.
So anyway, that's what you're really looking at proportionally. So
Okay.
that's why this is represented by a wall of light coming in at 90 degrees. So the northernmost orbit for the moon is at 23.4 degrees north along this path, and it can't go any further beyond that. It's just, according to their model, it cannot. So this is the range of the moon orbit as it allegedly orbits
Yeah,
the
because
Earth.
the moon essentially goes from Capricorn to Cancer and back over a
Right.
monthly cycle as opposed to an annual cycle like the sun apparently does.
So it does this. Again, their model, the globe Earth model, is the moon within a month goes up and down this path, which on here is a sine curve that goes like that over a period of 1 month. Or I'm sorry, was it 27 days, 28 days, 29 days, whatever it is.
Yeah, and
And
you
then,
know, originally it used to be we would set our clocks by the moon. Now we try to make the moon fit what our watches are doing, which is backwards. But I just saying. Go ahead, Brian.
right.
Sorry.
Okay, so then the same for the sun is that this is the northernmost direction of the sun, coming in at 23.4 degrees at the summer solstice. Now, if we were to change this out and put in the winter moon, or I'm sorry, the winter sun, it's coming at 23.4 degrees at this angle. So again, you have the moon that can only project up in this path as it goes around. So, based on that, if we go back to the summer issue, draggy thumb.
And essentially, I'll
Yeah,
just
go
sum it
ahead.
up. I'll sum it up. And we
Well,
can get.
I'm going to get to the exclamation point right now.
Okay.
Just so, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm fumbling around. So, with this being the maximum point of the orbit, any indication around the summer solstice up here is falling outside the orbit, meaning it's falling up here. Therefore, this cannot occur, but it can occur within the orbit on the South Pole. So again, all these are valid signatures during the summer month, but anything up here north of this line is not valid for an ecliptic event on this globe model. And conversely, when the sun is at the winter solstice going up this way, that any trajectory along the South Pole is not feasible according to this model. Now, if you go to this model, the signature that I have highlighted here or pointed out, this goes from 60 degrees north up to 88 and back down to around 35. So just from the 60 to 88 is where I put that on here. Now, in order for that to occur physically, the moon's orbit has to be up here at the
and maybe I'll just make a minor, not even correction, but a lot of this apparent position of the moon is due to the tilt of the Earth and not so much the orbit. Now, in the heliocentric model, the Earth allegedly orbits the sun on the ecliptic, call it the solar plane, whatever you want to call it. It's a plane that the Earth orbits the sun on. And the moon essentially allegedly orbits the Earth on that same ecliptic plane, only it's inlaid at about 5 degrees. So the moon, while it does, allegedly in the heliocentric model, vary from the ecliptic by 2.5 degrees. The big 24.5 degree divergence in the moon and the sun that you're seeing is all having to do with just the tilt of the Earth and the seasons with the sun or the months with the moon. So hopefully I'm maybe just clarifying a point that didn't need to be clarified. I don't know.
No, it is, and I'm kind of still fumbling around, but
okay.
As the sun comes in at this wall of light at essentially 90 degrees, that this is the projection of the band is the direct shadow of the moon on the globe model. And this is just indicating from I keep using the word like a stylus on a record that creates these trajectories of where that would be. So your band for that trajectory is anywhere from this bandwidth down to this point. And it really can't be anything else. So again, with the sun coming in at this direction, that this is basically what you've got. But you're also limited by the 23.4 north and 23.4 south. So again, any signature up here during the summer months is not feasible on this model. That was the conclusion of the whole study, is that if we look at these, this is historically every 20 years that the blue are total eclipse. So I'll go in a little bit closer.
Yeah, I was going to say if you could maybe zoom in on one of those.
I'll just take my word for it. So again, I was saying down here that anything in the winter months is unlikely at the North Pole because it'd be falling south of the orbital path. So again, you've got November, so that's in the winter months. Again, these are 20-year cycles. Go a little bit.
And Edric, are you following so far? Do you have any questions so far? Are you pretty much following this? Because the first time I saw this, I was like, okay, can you go through that one more time? Because I really didn't get. I sort of got it, but I didn't. And we've actually gone further and applied the same numbers to sort of a flat Earth azimuthal equidistant projection, and it actually works very nicely. And it's kind of almost beautiful, I would say, because there's this sort of relationship with the sun and the moon going on that we never knew existed. But they apparently go through these 18-year repeating cycles that's been known for a long time. I just don't see these little, saying the sun is this huge gas giant gravity generator and the Earth is basically a grain of sand, and the moon is basically like an atom. These alignments are just so unlikely in the heliocentric model, yet they repeat like clockwork every 18 years. I think it's for solar or maybe the lunar. Anyway, there's just this perfect repeating cycle that goes on. especially with these signature patterns, that's just, to me, the heliocentric model is way too chaotic to produce predictable, perfect cycles like this, just because of
Yeah,
what's going on in the galaxy and the unknown elements.
now this is flying by the cuff, but this is January 26th, 1990, and it appears very similar signature is February 7th, 2008. So there's your 18-year span of a very similar signature. And again, when I did this study, I looked at three similar types at the North Pole, three similar at the South Pole, and I think five patterns that kind of S-shaped that also turned out to be on the 18-year cycle. So again, you'd have this one, say this was a pattern, and we'd look at a different year that I think this is the one that was also common to that signature. This was also another one. And again, this is all part of that study where they're categorized by types. So we had type A1, A2 being the 18-year difference between them. And with that, it was indicated that the replicating of it on the northern half, it just can't be done for the same signature on the southern half within that 18, well, I'm jumping around, with that 18-year cycle. But that's, I'm putting about 3 steps in there that may not make that clear. Hold on.
Yeah,
So again, maybe on the first year, say the 1990 cycle would be up here, and then the same cycle would be down here. And again, for the sun at that almost identical position, to have it occur up here and down here it's just unlike, it just physically could not be done on this globe model.
yeah, so essentially, because, and if Brian, if you don't mind, pull up the typical diagram of what needs to occur in the heliocentric model for a lunar eclipse, and it's a very specific set of circumstances.
For the lunar eclipse or the solar?
So, did I say lunar? Yeah, solar. Sorry.
So, yeah, this is this event. We got the North Pole.
Yeah, but you know where the diagram, kind of like the one you've got there with the umbra penumbra, but with the solar eclipse instead. Because
sure.
That it's sort of, that's a point that has to be made, because you have to have that very specific alignment, and it's not very likely in a heliocentric model. Now, this is obviously not to scale, but that is what has to occur in order for a solar eclipse to occur. And for that signature that you see should always be somewhere near the equator, no further north than the tropics, maybe a little bit further north than the tropics if the right conditions are involved, but certainly not a polar, you cannot have a polar solar eclipse event signature. It's just impossible on a globe Earth, unless you're changing the position of the sun and the moon and everything. But it actually does work on a flat Earth model, and I don't think we have slides prepared for that, but we can get into that maybe on another show. Not to steal the thunder at all, Brian, but one thing I want to make clear real quick, because there's a lot of misconceptions that people have about flat Earth when they first run into this. My whole concept of the universe has changed. I don't think that the stars are light years away distant. I don't think there are other galaxies. I don't think that the Earth is a disk flying through space. I believe, and I think that it's fairly well evidenced, that the Earth is just a stationary plane. It's fixed, immovable. Says it right in the Bible, just saying. But it's a stationary plane, and everything else in the night sky, the sun, the moon, the stars, they're all just a very magnificent and mysterious feature of our world. And science has taken a position throughout history that they don't want our world to be special or unique, and it's very convenient that we have these wandering stars that sort of behave peculiar to the relative background stars. And so somewhere about 500 years ago, they decided, well, we must live on one of those lights in the sky too. And there's a lot of conjecture, there's a lot of theory involved, and then some of it makes sense, but when it gets down to actual experimentation and, looking at things like eclipses and is this even possible on a globe, the resounding clear answer, when you really do dig into this and then just try to drop all the assumptions in terms of light years and gravity, there's a very good case for this, and I really hope that we can at least get Dr. Hovind looking at this critically, because I've seen some of the retorts that he's done to Flat Earth, and it's almost as if he's done a good job of debunking a lot of the straw man arguments, not faulting him for that, but there is a very big effort of people like the Flat Earth Society, not to be confused with the International Flat Earth Research Society, who are legitimate, but the Flat Earth Society, they basically set up these straw man arguments. Like, for example, they will say that gravity is caused by the Earth accelerating upward at 9.8 meters per second squared. And that's a total straw man false argument, which is ridiculous. And so any researcher that stumbles across the Flat Earth Society is going to say, well, that's ridiculous, and debunk it and then move on, but that isn't even part of the model at all. It's just a straw man argument. And so I really hope that Dr. Hovind, because I love the guy, I really do. I think he's one of the best researchers there are. He totally changed my perspective on evolution, I want to say fairly recently. And it was just sort of hurt my feelings to see, especially Dr. Hovind, who claims to be 100% evangelical Christian, and yet very clearly in Genesis and other places in the Bible, not to necessarily get into a scriptural debate, very clearly states that the earth is fixed and immovable, and the sun and moon make circuits around the face of the earth. So I just don't see how biblically the earth can be fixed and immovable and be a spinning globe. I mean, the two are mutually exclusive. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I have a quick question for.
Don't mess it up.
Pardon?
Don't mess it up.
Oh no, I'm just wondering. Do you have like a list of items that you want to pursue and like a checklist and cross them out? That I've looked into flight paths, I've looked into the curvature, I've looked into the math behind it. Do you have a checklist, or are you just kind of weighing it as you go forward, and are you going to compile things and present it to him? Or I'm just wondering what a little bit more formal of what it is you're doing and how it's going to be conveyed to him at some point.
Yeah, well, so earlier today, me and him just did a quick video on really the more common arguments that I run into that a lot of people post on YouTube. As well as we get quite a few number of calls from Flat Earth proponents, and so I just took some of the most common ones, and if you look at Kent Hovind Official, his YouTube channel, we did 3 videos on it today, and it was basically just me throwing out real quick, short explanations slash why I think the Earth is a round ball. So it was really today that me and him did the video, and it was just a real short, I think hour long, or 3 30-minute long videos that we did.
What are the biggest obstacles that you have that you just can't resolve in your mind that puts you back into accepting the... I'm not trying to sound condescending like John does. No, I'm just wondering what it is that's really your stumbling block, that I can't look, no pun intended, but I can't look beyond this because it just seems unresolvable on a flat model.
Well, the first one is, and I would say probably the biggest one for me is the sun itself. Why is the sun only projecting light on half of the Earth if it is a round ball?
No. Wait a minute. Wait. No, your arguments against the flat Earth. Is that
Yeah.
what you're indicating?
Yeah, I would say that's my biggest problem with the model is I don't know, I can't explain a ball above a flat plane that is emitting light in all directions that is unable to be seen at all hours of the day.
Oh, okay. Um, Maybe I can answer what's going on.
Sure.
I don't know if that's going to satisfy what your issues are, but the second part of what I looked at was all the solar and lunar eclipse, or not eclipse, but just the solar data for when the peak noon was at the summer solstice, the winter solstice, and both equinoxes. So on the flat model, if you can kind of get your perspective here, this is a side view. Here's the equator,
Okay, I see it.
and this is north, and this is going south. Again, the equator, 10 degrees north. So looking down on the flat model, we've
Okay.
got the center, north, then the equator, about here, and then the
Yep.
perimeter at 90 degrees south.
Okay.
So I looked at about 1,000 points and collected all the solar noon, meaning when the sun passes over that point, you have the maximum elevate, or was it what John, the
Azimuth.
azimuth, the maximum azimuth angle that the sun appears at. And with that, put in the 1,000 from starting at the north, walking into the center, and then walking back out, that all those, we'll go to that real quick.
Yeah, and also I've got when you get through here, I always point to Drew 777777's flat Earth working model because he took real observations of the sun from New York over the course of a year, once a month over the course of a year, and then also took time and date data and sort of figured out what the sunlight was doing over the course of a year. And it's kind of interesting because it is my belief that the Earth itself is, well, it's not my belief, it's very well proven that the Earth itself is sort of, it's a electromagnetic plate. It's a giant Tesla coil, if you will, and it's generating all of these electromagnetic fields, which light itself, all light is the visible spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is a very small sliver. I mean, if you've taken, I'm sure you understand some about like electromagnetism, and light is just being a very small sliver of that entire spectrum. And it appears as if the sunlight is not, you know, just traveling in perfectly straight lines like we think it is. It's actually sort of bending around these electromagnetic fields very naturally. And I can show you an example in an animation here in just a minute once Brian gets through showing you what he's showing you.
Okay, going back, that starting at the North Pole, we're at 82 degrees where there's actually information for giving the solar noon. Again, when the sun passes over that point is considered the solar noon. So if the point was along here, as the sun passed over, that would be the point of the solar noon. So you have the indication at 79 degrees 59 minutes north that the sun occurred at 33.5 degrees in the azimuth. And as you go further down, now I didn't get all the data for every single point, but you can see as numerically it decreases, you're walking to the center, the equator, that we're at 62 degrees. And these points were collected because they were graphed later. You'll see that. But so at 60 degrees north, we had a reference point. Going further, 55, we have a point. I'll just jump through. Then we get around 45 degrees north, so we're right around Michigan. Going further south, you can kind of see the reference, Des Moines, Cleveland. We're at 41 degrees north. Jump down a little bit more, 36 degrees. And speed this up a little. So we're at the equator around the 800 point. So we've got 0 degrees 2 minutes north. That we've got Macapa, Brazil, where we have information of where the sun is. Now this is at the summer solstice. We also did the fall equinox, this winter solstice, and this is just a different breakup and rescattering of the data, and at the spring equinox. And it turned out that the reason I have a couple spring equinoxes because the sun doesn't come up at 200 or doesn't set at 270 degrees at every point, and it doesn't rise at 90 degrees east in every instance. That between 2 days it varies between there. So kind of a gray area for the data. So it's kind of like tucked away. The fall came out very consistent on the given equinox date that all the sun rise and sets were at 90 degrees and 270 respectively. Again, for the spring equinox, they varied between 2 days of coming up at 90 and setting at 270. So with that.
Well, and you know, another thing too is, and this is just sort of backing up the wagon a little bit, so hold that thought, and I will go into the animation, but mainstream science claims that the sun is a big, giant gravity generator. It's a big ball of gas that's not burning. It's some of the lightest gases, actually, helium and hydrogen, which are performing what is called atomic fusion, which only exists in theory. It's never been actually demonstrated. It's just a theory. And so science answers the big question saying, you know, the sun is the primary object of our solar system, and the Earth is relatively a speck of dust that couldn't survive without the sun. The flat Earth model is completely different, where the Earth itself is the primary object, and the sun and the moon are merely, you know, there to light and heat the Earth and to help us keep track of time, which is sort of also explained in, you know, in biblical scripture. And so, you know, for me, I'd much rather tell you honestly, I don't know what the sun is. I have some theories. I think it's an electromagnetic anomaly, or maybe, you know, something more abstract, has to do with the ionized plasma tubes in the lower magnetosphere. But you know, I don't know what the sun is. But am I going to tell you, well, it's helium and hydrogen doing atomic fusion? First of all, I'll tell you that helium was named after the sun god Helios, and the sun was named after the sun god Helios. So it's not a coincidence that science believes the sun is made mainly of helium. It's just they decided to call it Helios, and they decided to call helium helium, and it's all conjecture, it's theory. And so I would much rather tell you, look, we really don't know. We need people to look into this, and we need to study this and figure out what exactly is the sun. One thing I can tell you for sure is that it's not 93 million miles away, not even close. Probably.
Hey, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
So, Edric, your question is how does the sun set on a flat Earth model?
Yes,
that's your biggest question, right?
Well, really the whole sun orbiting or rotating around a flat plane and not lighting up the entire flat plane.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just like, and this is really simplistic, but just like a ship sailing away from you on the ocean, you lose it from your perspective. It goes away. But we know when you take a telescope, you can bring it back into perspective. My idea of why the sun sets is because it gets to the point on the flat plane where it can no longer light, and the reason it can no longer light is because it's not 93 million miles away. It's much closer than they say it is to us. So if in fact it was 93 million miles away on a flat Earth model, it wouldn't work. there would be no night and day. You're correct. It would always light us. But just like when you look up in the night, the sky, there's a lot of anomalies that I don't really understand either. Like, for instance, the other day, both the moon and the sun were in full view. I mean, I could see the sun, I could see the moon, but yet the moon was not a full moon. I can't answer questions in regard to why there's these strange anomalies going on with the sun and the moon. But in my perspective, the reason why we have day and night on a flat Earth is because the sun gets out of perspective from where we're at, and it can no longer shed light on that part of the flat Earth. And to take it one step further, if this was a globe, a spinning ball, how is it that, and this is the Jeranism effect, and I've talked with John about this before. So the theory goes that in the summertime we're on one side of the sun, and come the winter solstice in January, we're on the other side of the sun. So from June to January, we travel around the sun. How is it possible that if we, and the way I look at it, I'll set it up as like the Earth circling around the sun like the clock. So the sun
I've got a graphic up on screen. I believe I'm presenting. If y'all can't see it, just click on my
It's
icon.
up, John.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so there's the clock, and in the wintertime it shows it as 3 o'clock, and we'll just say the United States is facing the sun from the 3 o'clock position, and it's facing to the east, and actually to the west. How is it possible for us to have daylight when we go to the other side of the sun and we're still facing west? It's dark. It's nighttime. How is it that the days don't flip over? We don't go from being daylight at the same time to dark. It seems to me that you'd have a complete flip where the days would all start. There'd have to be a flip of the daylight, because you're looking out into two different directions. So
well, and I think, even further than that, and I think that's sort of argued away and explained away with a sidereal day versus a solar day, because mathematically it actually adds up over 6 months. But my point of contention, and I think really, I mean, not to argue with you, but what I refer to as the Jeranism effect is simply visible space from winter to summer. If you're standing at the equator in winter, visible space, if you look straight up, 90 degrees above your head, should be way the heck up and to the left, okay, if you're looking at the diagram. Now, visible space 6 months later, standing from the same point, looking straight up above your head, would be a completely different sector of the universe, and we should have completely unique sets of constellations and stars for every season. But in fact, we can see all of the same stars, all of the same constellations from somewhere on the Earth all year long, all season long, year after year, hundreds of years. And by the way, the North Pole star Polaris remaining fixed above our axis of rotation is impossible in the heliocentric model, especially when you consider precession of the equinoxes, which is supposed to be 1 degree sort of regression of our axis every year, or 1 degree every 72 years, which we should have a new North Star every 50 or 100 years at the most. So there's all these little issues with the heliocentric model that don't add up. Very simply, if you just study this diagram, and I give Jaron credit because it makes a lot of sense. You can only study the stars and look at the stars during the nighttime. You can't study the stars during the day. And so if we're tilted like they say we are, and we're going around the sun like they say we are, the fact that we can see, and I verified this, I've got a spreadsheet, we can see many of the same, if not all of the same stars from some point on the Earth all year long. That right there totally debunks the heliocentric model 100%. There is no arguing it. But there you have it.
So, John, what were you saying? How do we explain away the fact that in order for us to have, when the winter time, we'd have to look to the west, we'd be facing west to
No,
look
I
at the sun?
I totally agree with you. I think that you're absolutely right that we should have a switch over. We should have to set our clocks back, regressing 12 hours over 6 months. But, high noon is high noon because the sun is directly overhead. High noon isn't high noon because your watch says it's 12. And so, again, I think that we try to make the sun follow our concept of time rather than, building our concept of time around what the sun is doing, if I'm making any sense. But again, the whole point to this is, and it's very conclusive, I mean, you can use stellarium, pick a place near the equator, try to find, just randomly spot check a bunch of constellations, put them on a list, and then go 6 months back or 6 months forward, doesn't matter, and see if you can find even one of the same constellations. And if you can find one, then the heliocentric model doesn't work, because visible space, at least especially from the equator, should be opposite sectors of the universe, and it's not. So there you have it. Brian, did you want to go? Were you still on topic? You want
Yeah,
me to
I
stretch
just
back over
want
to you?
to, yeah, if I could complete the thought.
Absolutely. Let me put it back over to you. Okay, there you have it.
If everyone's following the gist of what was done, what the numbers represent, now when you plot out the solar noon as you walk from the north to the South Pole, is you get everything on a linear track, that from 90 degrees south, that the angle will be around 38 degrees. And at 70 degrees south, it'll be around 44 degrees. Now, one thing, when I jump around, Excel grabs the thing. So, again, this is for the winter solstice, where on a flat model now, it's on the outermost orbit that everything lines up.
Well, and really quick, sorry to interrupt. I
Yep.
hate to sound like devil's advocate, or I hate to be nitpicky, but what we're looking at here is sort of, it's an azimuthal equidistant projection. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a model. It's
Yeah.
similar. It has issues with it. So the AE projection has issues with it, just like the Mercator projection has issues with it. And so I don't necessarily like to call it a model. And there's people
You're
that are
absolutely right, and yep.
there's
I apologize right now because I
no, no,
made
no.
that presumption, and
Yeah,
no, I'm running ahead without making that clarification, and
right.
it can appear very erroneous. So thanks.
Well, and the point is, though, is there's because there's people have been looking into this now for a couple of years, and there are issues with this circular model, but I think it just has to do with light playing tricks on us, and there, people looking at more of a linear model. But just so you know, the AE projection does work to show what the sun and the moon are doing, although, you could even lay this out in a Mercator projection. There's lots of different ways to sort of visualize the longitude and latitude lines. You can visualize it on a globe. You can visualize it in an AE projection, Mercator projection. We're really not sure which one of these is accurate. Although I know I'm 100% convinced and believe it's been thoroughly debunked in terms of the spinning globe. I'm sure of it. It's been thoroughly debunked. But anyway, go ahead, Brian. Sorry to keep interrupting you.
Okay. So again, just wrapping up with the concept and thought is from the north, walking in toward the equator, is that this is the line of the sun at the solar noon. So as you get closer to the equator, or to the point of where the sun is orbiting, the light, or the angle of the sun, appears more and more till its maximum point. Again, I took the equinoxes and the solstices as the maximum point, and so this is for the winter solstice at both the equinoxes and for the summer solstice. And this is the line. I mean, this whole line would be filled with data points I just showed, these are just the random plots to show that it is a linear projection in both parts, and they're identical to the tenth of a degree. So what this looks like, this is what that looks like as you go from 0 degree north, getting to the equator. You're at 90 degrees overhead, and then, I'm sorry, this is, north to the equator, then this is south, going back around. So you can see the distribution is fairly uniform. And as it turns out, that this becomes an equation of that's what I wiped out earlier, John. I think it's 1 minus the inverse tangent gives you the equation of that line, meaning at 0 degrees. Oops. At 0 degrees, you'd have 90 degree is the projected sun height, and at 90 degrees, you basically have mathematically infinity, but that becomes the actual distance to the sun, which is identical to the given diameter, or I'm sorry, radius of the sun. So as this is plotted out, it becomes apparent what they did, and they're just going to reverse and say, well, that's what we're doing. But if you flip that around and wrap going from North Pole to South Pole, that this is the projection of the solar noons plotted out on the round map, this points out and has a point of convergence. I mean, it could be anything because it's such a tiny angle. 92.5 million seems to be the number they grabbed. But again, when you wrap these numbers on or put these numbers, roll them out on a flat plane, is where you get the diameter of the
Yeah, and
Earth.
maybe we should pause here for just a second and see if if you're up to speed. The old equation that's the ancient Greeks. I believe it was Eratosthenes, or maybe I've got that wrong, but I think it was Eratosthenes, one of those old Greek guys who who supposedly discovered the radius of the Earth by looking at the angles of the shadow cast by the sun at 2 points that were essentially on the same meridian. Assume that the Earth is a sphere, and using those points of convergence or triangulation, you get 92, 93 million miles. On the other hand, if you assume the Earth is a plane, using the same observations, you get the sun being about 4,000 miles. Now, I think that 4,000 miles is probably a lot more close to accurate than 93 million miles, but I still think that light is playing tricks on us in terms of, it doesn't, like on a local level, light does travel in perfectly straight lines, sunlight. So like if, let's say, you're an ancient Greek and you're sitting in the Colosseum, all of the columns around you are going to cast parallel shadows. So that would lead one little observer to believe that the sunlight is always coming in at parallel lines. However, when you look at things like sunbursts through clouds, you'll see that those rays actually do converge. Science has a name for it. They say that it's crepuscular rays. It has to do with perspective. But if you apply that same sort of idea to like a string of essentially parallel lightning bolts across the similar horizon, you don't have that convergence of the lightning bolts. So really what it appears is we have a local sun. The Earth is not curved. It is flat. And the sun is much closer than Eratosthenes would have estimated, which he had to assume the Earth was a sphere to get that number. And so, again, both numbers are mathematically correct. It's just depending on whether you assume the Earth is a sphere and use spherical trigonometry to triangulate the distance of the sun. And also, if you use plane trigonometry, 4,000 miles or so is also correct mathematically. Now, it can't be both. It has to be one or the other, but both numbers are technically mathematically correct. So I just thought I'd throw that in there in case you weren't aware of that little tidbit.
I wonder, does the moon do the same thing? I don't remember what the moon looks like when it's shining brightly through the clouds and casting some kind of. I'm not talking about the halo.
Yeah,
But if it's
moonlight
reflecting,
is moonlight
Moon
is
does not cast beams, if that's what you're. I mean, obviously this picture is the sun, and I don't think there's any comparable scenario where the moon projects the same way, to my knowledge. I don't know.
No, it doesn't,
yeah.
and really, like, that's another really interesting topic, Ed. If you haven't looked into it, is the differences between sunlight and moonlight is another really interesting thing. And they were doing experiments like back in the 1800s. So one example of why sunlight is different than moonlight is sunlight is putrefying. No, I'm sorry. Sunlight is a preservative. It will help it'll help you preserve things. It will decrease bonfire activity, whereas in moonlight it's actually cool light. It's putrefying, and it will increase a bonfire, like a level or magnitude of a bonfire. And so there's different properties, like if you actually, there's a process where you can take natural sunlight and basically magnify it and really get a high focus beam through, like like burning a bug with a magnifying glass. But you can take this process and essentially melt gold with sunlight. Now, using the moonlight for the same process, it actually cools the whatever substance is about 8 degrees using the same process as the sunlight. And so there are some major differences between sunlight and moonlight, which I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say, therefore, the moonlight is not a reflection of sunlight. There are people who will say that, but I just think that it's interesting, and a lot of people aren't aware of that, if you measure the temperature in the shade in the moonlight, it's actually warmer in the shade in the moonlight. So the moonlight is actually a cooling light, it appears. And recent technologies, we've developed cool lasers. So we're sort of just now catching up with God, it would appear, with in terms of moonlight. Haha, it's just a joke.
I have a video that I'd like to share. I'm wondering can you play sound?
Is it copyrighted? Do you own the copyright for it, or?
My video.
Oh yeah, okay, sure, absolutely. Do you want me to present you, or you want me to just punch in the link, or?
It's a video that I put out there on YouTube. It's not.
Okay. Do you want?
Yeah. Well, what it is a 6-minute video.
Okay, I see the link you sent. Yep.
That demonstrates what happens when they shot up a missile. I can't remember if it was late last year or this year, and it was a private sector group of people, and I guess they got it up 73 miles up or 73,000 feet up, whatever it was. It was like the longest or the highest altitude ever achieved by private rocket people. And what they show in there is really exciting, because it proves that Earth is a plane. Because what happened was just at that short distance up, they captured the moon, which was supposed to be on the other side of the planet if it's a ball sphere, proving that the Earth is a flat plane. So that's in there, but it's also talking about what the visual vanishing phenomena is at great distances, and I tried to explain it in there. I'm still trying to get everybody to wrap their minds around this, because it's the missing element in all these discussions about the illusion that you're talking about, trying to describe why are we seeing something here when it's supposed to be there, and why can't we see all of it, kind of thing.
And I think I've caught an interesting freeze frame of this of your video at about 157. Now, is this object here, and I'm pretty sure I'm presenting, is that the moon right there, that little tiny dot?
That's the moon.
Yeah. So one thing that you'll notice, if you
Don't you want
study,
to play my full? Don't you want to play the full video?
do you want me to go ahead and just roll it? Yeah, I can roll the whole. You want me to start it over and just roll the video?
Yeah, there's sound to it.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
you can't
Also, I'll
play
just.
if the sound doesn't project out, then the
I don't.
narration that goes with it will be lost.
Okay, I'm not sure. I think I think that the Hangout has a way I can do that. I'm not 100% sure how to do it though. Enable. I think there was. Let's see.
What it's also demonstrating is that what is being captured by the video camera, although it is a GoPro with a lens that isn't straight, it's either wide angle or fisheye. Regardless, when that rocket is spinning with this fixed camera attached to it, it's capturing a horizon that's warping, as I described to you earlier, with an apogee and a perigee,
Yeah, and
which
I think I can roll the video, but it's not going to pick up the sound. So I mean, I can definitely roll through it, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I just don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna get the sound. Um, one thing that
okay.
one
Well,
thing that
then
I
I'll stop. I'll stop. I'll tell you to stop to where you're gonna. Well, you already got the freeze frame on this thing. That is the moon,
yeah.
which, according to where the moon was supposed to be, you wouldn't be able to see it anywhere. And then
Yeah, in the heliocentric
you,
model, it should have been like way down on the other end of the ball.
on
But
the other side of the planet.
yeah, yeah. And if you study a lot of high altitude weather balloon footage, you'll notice that the moon always appears to be very, very tiny, and that's what leads me to believe that like once you're down here in the troposphere, this atmosphere is sort of acting like a lens, a magnifying lens. And it's that sort of excitement of the atmosphere that allows the little, relatively small sun to light and heat the Earth. The light is radiating. It's not just traveling in straight lines, it's radiating. And what I was going to show you, actually, real quickly, bounce over to this. Again, this is Drew777. He based this on real observation as well as time and date uh, data. And this is what the sunlight is doing over the course of a year. And it sort of answers your question as to why don't we, why do we have sunrise and sunset? Because the sun is a close local body, and depending on, I guess, certain angles of the light or maybe the electromagnetic fields of the earth going through cycles, the light from the sun is behaving very erratically, and this is based on real observation and real data. And so it appears to me that in the north, being the center in an AE projection, you've got a very high, basically a magnetic vortex going on here, and when the electromagnetic waves coming, from the sun meet with this electromagnetic vortex, they're just simply not able to cross over to the other side. And so I think that's why you've got like daytime right here in North America, but nighttime relatively close by over here in China, because the light is simply not able to propagate through this magnetic vortex that is emanating from the center. So hopefully that sort of also answered that previous question that Ed had, and I will bounce right back to this. Because that is a very nice, I just so happened to pause it there, and it's a nice catch of the very flat horizon, although it is just a smidgen of it, a very tiny moon that technically shouldn't be there. And
You're bursting the bubble of the video. Would you play the video from the beginning, please?
Sure, yeah. Sure.
Because I got to get going. I'm sorry, I did mention that. I have to get off. So.
Yeah, well, technically the show ends at midnight, but so we've got about 10 minutes. But if it
I
goes,
forgot you're on Easter time. I was like, man, I gotta go to bed.
oh no, you got 3 more hours, dude. No, I'm kidding. You guys, if we go late, that's fine. No, I'm talking 10 more minutes, and if we go a little bit late, that's fine. We can actually go a whole nother hour, but I don't want to put anybody through that if they don't feel like it, if they're not up for it. If you got other things to do, I understand. Trust me. But okay, so and again, if I put the audio on it, I need to set up audio control panel. I've been struggling with it a little bit, and I've got so many other things going on. But
That's all right. It was just mostly music. But
okay,
what's important is in where you're seeing the moon, the people that have shot that rocket off, their voices are in the background
hmm
saying so that's what it is, and so that's what's important about it. But to get the whole idea of what this video is, just 6 minutes of it, is that you start from the beginning and roll it to the end instead of where you are.
no, I started it from the beginning.
You know, is it okay?
Yeah. Did, did you want to narrate, or maybe?
Well,
Okay, so it's getting into the rocket launch, and I believe that was amateur
that was,
rocket launch.
yep.
Yeah.
It'll explain it here in the text. There it went. There you
Yeah.
see it. I blew it up so that you could see it.
Awesome.
Now, as the rocket's spinning, you're going to be looking at a horizon. That was like they couldn't tell what that was. They said it was a UFO. Okay, so here is the rocket spinning, and you're looking at an apparent horizon line that's warping in the center of this GoPro, which should always be a continuous curve in a, like a hemisphere, not with a dip like that. And it
Right.
also looks like an apogee. Doesn't look like a circular curve.
What that basically does is prove that the GoPro cameras, with the fisheye lens, they don't take as there's movement, they don't. It doesn't. It distorts the actual view. And you see that on the where the guy, the Red Bull guy, jumps out of the pod. You see as the camera moves, you see the horizon line go up and down just like you saw there in that video.
Well, really, I think what's happening is that within the visual range of objects that have not disappeared yet, regardless of the distortion of the lens, it's not going to warp as much as we see a flat plane warp. They didn't modify that to make Earth look like a globe sphere. And the lens was capturing something that happened to be a visual illusion beyond its ability to see within the visual range. In other words, it's diverging now from the point that the vanishing point is. So there is an optical illusion beyond at great distance, and then there's a slight optical illusion just because of the curvature of the lens within that range. So everything within, yeah, there's a little distortion there, but why is everything way beyond really distorted? This part of the film is showing that panoramic sweep where the Earth comes in at a really weird angle.
Right. Yeah.
But what you're not seeing at the top of the frame and beyond, which is out of frame, is that it's actually straightening out. It's the same thing. You never saw the Earth leave if you were to be able to see outside the frame. But within the frame of the video capture, it just appears to be a globe Earth when it's really not. It was a continual horizon that just went out of view, just because of the rectangle of the frame.
Yeah.
And now what we're going to see just after this was really exciting when I saw it, is when I truly realized that they didn't edit any of these images, these video captures. It's really, I think, what they're taking with regard to, well, I'm getting lost because I'm reading too at the same time I'm looking at this. But the next thing that you're going to see is the 1958 or 59 General Electric missile test that they shot up with a 16 millimeter camera with film that captured the same phenomena, the same illusion. Did we already pass it? We'd have to kind of look at that again.
Yeah, I can go back, and it was very brief
Oh, you
towards
did
the
see it?
end.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the black and white one.
It was a black and white one.
Yeah, let's see, where was that? Was it back here? No.
It was the same phenomenon. So as that 1959 missile launch took off and the 60 millimeter camera was recording that, what appeared to be the Earth as a ball was really a flat plane in a distorted view, and way underneath or way above is really the horizon, but it's so warped that it's going up in a big curve up and then back down, and you see it again in the picture as if it looks like a sphere when it's really not.
Yes, I think the horizon is very much a subjective thing, you know.
I'm talking about reality here. This is what that thing captured. It wasn't a GoPro lens.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so that horizon line is going to be an equidistant circle around the observer, but like if you were to instantly slide over 1,000 miles, you know, towards the direction we're facing, you still see the same thing, I believe. I think it's a subjective thing just depending on.
Well, let's discard the word subjective with every opinion that's made only for this reason. We're not seeing it in the video frame or the film frame. It's out of frame, but it's there. You just have to follow the line and follow it back down. And I wish, you know, we had a 360-degree view up and down and over to the sides to be able to see this. And then it would be proof that there is a visual warp distortion that occurs at great distances based on the fact that we cannot see actual objects beyond a certain distance ahead of us. A telescope would get you reach further, but you'd still have that same fading out of objects and making everything look warped just because it's in a circle or a sphere that's all around you.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And when I say subjective, what I mean is if somebody launched an identical rocket, you know, 1,000 miles away, they'd see essentially the same thing. But if you were to, say, triangulate on the moon from both of those positions, I think that you'd get a much nearer, and also because you don't have the distortions of the troposphere, you know, bending light and magnifying things, you'd have a better, I think, a better, more accurate triangulation of heavenly bodies.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, but yeah, that's awesome. That's a good find. I had done a video on, there was a 1949, I want to say 1946 rocket launch where it was a supposedly a confiscated German V2 rocket that when you pick apart the video and actually watch it, it was like they launched a rocket and then they cut to like a scale model, and it's so obviously now, you know, with our eyes getting, you know, better and better at catching, you know, image or trick photography, you know, the stuff from the 40s, you're like, wow, that is totally a scale model. So they've been faking space, you know, for a long time. They really, they've been laying it on thick with sci-fi things like, you know, Lost in Space and Star Wars and Star Trek, and I think just people have a really misguided understanding of really what's going on in the universe. And I think that science has basically done everything the opposite of the way the Bible says it is. And actually the topic that I sort of wanted to talk about, and I'm glad that you popped on, Ed, and I don't know how much longer anyone can hang out. It is midnight, so if anybody has to go, I definitely understand, or midnight on the East Coast. Something that I was just going to kick around a little bit, and we can, you know, we can make it short or we can talk about it for a little while, was essentially scriptural affirmation versus scriptural proof. And what I mean by this is a lot of people, and I don't have any problem with this, but a lot of people, a lot of flat earthers claim that the Bible proves the flat earth. And I have just a slight, disagreement with that. I believe that the Bible, and whether you're talking Old Testament or the Good News, was all written with the understanding and the presupposition that the earth was a stationary plane. There were ancient Greeks and, bizarre cults who theorized things about spinning globes, but that was being debated even up into the 1800s. And so, for the Bible to be written in a context where everyone knew the earth was a stationary plane, it wasn't written in such a way that it had to prove the earth wasn't a spinning globe. However, if you read Genesis again with under the assumption that the earth is a stationary plane, it actually makes a lot more sense. And even extra biblical texts like the book of Enoch make a lot of sense in a flat earth model, where Enoch talks about the sun traveling in circuits above and around the earth. And you just simply can't have, and again, I realize this is trying to take a biblical stance, which I typically don't do. Let me back up a little bit. I think that the Bible is a flat earth book through and through. I mean, I really do. But I don't think that you're ever going to prove the flat earth using the Bible. Now, in terms of personal affirmations, it was a huge personal affirmation for me when I finally came to the conclusion, and yes, you can call me bizarre and crazy, but when I did finally come to the conclusion that the earth is not a spinning globe, it literally brought me back to faith that I was brought up in. I was brought up in a Christian faith, and to me there was just a conflict of interest. I mean, I was literally confounded growing up trying to understand, how can I be a scientific person and a religious person, because these are two totally different stories that are mutually exclusive to one another. So, we all grow up under the assumption that science is correct. This has been vetted. This has been tested. These experiments have been repeated. But when you actually go and research this, all of the proofs for a spinning globe are theories that take the presupposition that the earth is a spinning globe in the first place. So that includes gravity, that includes, the solar system, that includes the Big Bang. I mean, everything, all of it, this whole great deception relies on the presupposition that the earth is a spinning globe, when anybody that hasn't been indoctrinated their entire lives into this sort of scientism as a religion or scientism as a worldview, as opposed to science as a process to understanding the truth, people have been deceived. And a casual observer that sort of just dumps all the things that we think we know about distant stars and galaxies and really take a good look at this thing, the evidence for a stationary plane far outweighs any sort of theories that one can come up with and back with mathematics to say that it's feasible. But the physical evidence is what I go by. And to me, the fact that the physical evidence jives with what the Bible is saying was a very, very important personal affirmation for me. Now, on the other hand, and I promise I'll give you a chance to talk, but on the other hand, if you approach, say, an atheist with this topic from a biblical standpoint, then you've lost the argument. However, if you show an atheist the proofs of a flat earth, a friend of mine, David Weiss, he's a pretty well outspoken flat earther. He says he's a self-proclaimed, or was a self-proclaimed atheist warrior, and flat earth literally brought him back to being a spiritual, not necessarily religious, but a spiritual person, believing in God, believing in creation, as opposed to Big Bang. The primordial soup, and then amoebas, and then evolution, and then us, where Grandpa was a monkey. And I think Dr. Hovind said it best when evolution is ridiculous because we don't see things like intermediary cross species, and you never see a dog give birth to anything other. You never see a dog give birth to a not dog. So I thought that was very eloquently put, and I laughed my butt off. But maybe just giving you a chance to respond to some of that, and maybe what you think, what your thoughts are, Ed, and any questions that you have, and maybe if you've any further inclination to look into this more deeply.
Was that all addressed towards me?
That was all addressed towards you, and I expect a point by point. No, I'm kidding.
Oh man.
That was just sort of me rambling, but yeah, yeah. Let me stop
Oh,
sharing anyway. Screen share, and I'll just stop presenting. Oh, okay. So I stopped it. All right. Anyway, so go ahead, man, and tell me what you think, and tell us definitely where we can find your stuff and Dr. Hovind's stuff, and what you've been working on, and what we can look for from you in the future.
well, I do have to hit the hay here soon, but as far as the Bible go and the flat Earth, I mean, I've always read it subconsciously in my mind, believing that the Earth is a round ball shape. And now I'm reading it with, okay, what does the Bible teach? And I'll be very honest about it and say that the Bible does not say that the Earth is a ball, but I also say it does not say that the Earth is a flat plane. I know Mr. Moot, he's a guy I've talked to quite a few times on YouTube, and he'll agree with me. He'll say that he uses Bible verses to defend the flat Earth, but he won't say that the Bible actually says that the Earth is flat. There are, however, a lot of verses that I feel a lot of people use to say that, aha, here's the Bible verse that says, there's four corners of the Earth, and you can't have four corners on a ball.
Mm-hmm.
But my simple response to that is well, it depends on how you define the word earth, because in Genesis 1:10, God says, and God called the dry land earth. Well, if we read that same verse in context and say, okay, well, the dispersed of Judah are collected from the four corners of the earth, what it is saying is that the dispersed of Judah are living on all the corners of the dry land, meaning on they were scattered throughout the dry land. That Bible verse makes sense if you interpret the word earth as dry land, but it doesn't make sense if you interpret the word earth as in a round circle that has corners on the Antarctic, because if there are corners at the Antarctic and the dispersed of Judah are being gathered together from those corners, well, then you've got people living in Antarctica, and they're the dispersed of Judah, and the flat Earth model says that nobody lives on Antarctica.
Well, and one thing I would say, I'm not sure, I get a little feedback there, hopefully it'll die out. In a biblical context, a lot of times they use the phrase "the world" or "the earth," and a lot of times it's been translated, not erroneously, but the terms are sort of interchangeable in our context, world and earth. But in their context, they thought of the world as basically the known world, which certainly didn't include the Americas. So when they were talking about the world, I think that they were more talking about their known world. I mean, it was basically the Middle East. Surely they were aware of the Orient, maybe not, but I've never liked that argument about the four corners either. I think that I've always sort of equated that to meaning north, south, east, and west, and it's just more of an analogy than anything else.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think that that's sort of a moot argument either way. I'm familiar with Mr. Moot's stuff. I've probably watched everything he's done. I don't necessarily, agree with him on everything because, again, I think that the Bible was written in such a way that it was never intended to prove or disprove the shape of the earth, but it does indeed say that it's fixed and immovable, and I find it hard to believe, and again, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but if somebody claims to be evangelical Christian, meaning, literally verbatim believes the Bible word for word, but pick and choose when they believe fixed and immovable, I mean, you can't have a fixed and immovable spinning sphere going, 66,600 miles an hour around the sun, which is going a 500,000 miles an hour around the galactic center, which is traveling through space over 1,000,000 miles an hour, just like all the other galaxies. I mean, that is very much contrary to fixed and immovable. And so, just on a biblical standpoint there, that's why I was always so confounded, and I've always been sort of a scientific person, even since I was very small. I always put, one of my things on the list to Santa was always a chemistry set. So I was always very much into science. I was sort of forced, to go to church on Sundays, which obviously did me some good. But to say that the Bible is verbatim, word for word truth, but then to pick and choose the pieces that you want to call truth, I mean, to me, I have an issue with that. I mean, do you see what I'm saying, at least with fixed and immovable?
Yeah, no, I understand that. Well, I would break it down to it depends on how you define Earth again. If you define Earth as dry land and you say it's fixed and immovable, then it would fit the ball Earth and the flat Earth model, because the Earth is not moving. The dry land is not moving. So again, it just depends on how you would define it. And in Genesis 1:10, God called the dry land earth. So if the dry land is fixed and unmovable,
so you say, well, hold on. So you're saying that traveling over 1,000,000 miles an hour through space, just with the galaxy, is not moving?
well, I would say the world, meaning the entire world itself, is moving, but the dry land itself, no, I would not consider that to be moving.
Okay. I mean, I have a tough time swallowing that, but if that's how you want to, I mean, if that's the position that you want to take, I mean, I guess there's no arguing with it, but I just find it completely contrary. I mean, I just.
Argue it.
Go ahead, sure.
The continents have allegedly moved, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, to talk about tectonic plates, too, I wasn't even going to go there. I'm just talking about spinning around and flying through space. I mean, that's moving.
You can't call it fixed and immovable if in what Edric's saying, we know that the land has moved its position from where it's at. So I mean, that wouldn't really change the argument from fixed and immovable in my mind, that the land masses don't move, because they most certainly do. I don't really think that reference means, when they say fixed and immovable. I understand what you're trying to say, that the Earth is hurtling through space. The land masses are actually fixed and immovable from their position. So I get what you're saying there.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, my position is that the spot where you're sitting right now, other than slow tectonic movement possibly, but the spot where you're sitting has never moved a single yard. Never. It's never going anywhere. It's not spinning. It's not orbiting the sun. The sun isn't orbiting the galactic center. There is no such thing as a galaxy. Galaxies were invented in 1929 by Hubble.
I agree with you on that portion. but from what Edric's saying, I agree with, if in the globe model, just because the Earth is hurtling through space, I agree with what he's saying, that it's fixed. The land mass would be fixed. So I understand what he's saying there. In the globe model, heliocentric model.
Okay. Well, I mean, I call, if I say something's fixed and immovable, I would say that is the exact opposite as spinning and flying around the sun and flying around the galaxy and flying through space, and all of these, often contradicting trajectories, ultimately with the galactic frame of reference of over 1,000,000. I've heard up to 13 million miles an hour. I mean, I can't call something fixed and immovable that's doing all of that. So we'll just have to agree to disagree on that.
Yeah, I'll give you an analogy. Is if I'm sitting in my front seat of my car and I'm saying the front seat is fixed and immovable as my car, but I'm traveling from California to Florida, my chair is fixed and immovable relative to the car, not relative to where it is in space. If that's just an analogy of how I look at it, and that's
Right, but
Uh,
I think that the term fixed and immovable speaks for itself. I mean, I don't think it can be any more clear than that. I mean, I could understand if it was phrased, you know, fixed and immovable relative to the water or relative to the, you know, background stars or something, but no, I mean, it clearly states fixed and immovable. And see, this is why I really don't, I tend not to get into biblical arguments about it, because I don't think it was written in such a way that it needed to be proven one way or another. But at least, you know, God had the foreknowledge to warn us about this great deception, so that we may be, you know, so that we may not be deceived. And I think that this whole thing, starting as early as the 1940s and the 1950s, going through the Apollo missions all the way through today, is a huge, grandiose deception that has fooled everybody in the world into worshiping the sun. So that's just
And look at what they've done in that process and all the things that they've derived from that deception. NASA, the satellites, and directing everything away from a very small existence into a vast, abyss of we're just a little mistake that happens to be something that came out of nothing. And again, that's part of the deception that I think is so damaging, that you take the globe model and it breaks 180 degrees from the biblical scripture. So I think, that by itself destroys the whole concept of what the Bible represents. And I agree with John, is that I didn't think that this was going to be the interpretation of the Great Deception. I thought that was going to be an alien invasion or something. But I think this, this has 500 years of momentum behind it. So I think that, for me, that's broken through the finish line for being the deception at this point.
well, and then one more thing too, from a biblical standpoint, and then we'll wrap it up. But you've got the number 666 encoded into the globe Earth model multiple times. So you've got the 23.4-degree angle off of the off of vertical axis tilt, but if you take that same angle off the horizontal, it's 66.6 degrees. So that's a coincidence. But then you've also got the Earth allegedly traversing around the Sun at 666 miles an hour, and the supposed expected curvature can be figured out by multiplying the distance in miles squared by 0.666 to render the results in vertical drop in feet. And so I think that it's, to have that many triple sixes encoded into the globe Earth model, not even intentionally. It's just a happenstance. To me, that was very much an affirmation. But I've always tended to be a spiritual person. I mean, as confounded as I've been as a scientific person and a spiritual person, Flat Earth has sort of bridged that gap for me, not because I'm some cuckoo, wanting to believe some fantasy, but because there's empirical evidence for this, and it actually matches my observations. It matches what's in the Bible, and so it's just a very, to me, it was a big personal affirmation. But again, in terms of proof, it doesn't work so well even with people who are evangelical Christians. And so that was sort of my point, and it was illustrated, I believe. And that was just one of the topics I wanted to cover, and I think we sort of did. And again, the topic was scriptural affirmation or personal affirmation in Scripture of the flat Earth versus Scripture proving flat Earth. So
I took a.
uh,
Oh, I
go ahead.
thought
No, go right ahead. I was done. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was taking a good look at Genesis, because I was trying to discern what the formation theory was according to the days. Each day a particular element was laid down until it was all over and done. That as I was looking at it, I was contemplating the notion that maybe Genesis wasn't talking about human beings at all, but they were talking about the giants that were exterminated, antediluvian period, which would be the Great Flood.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And then the torch passed on to human beings through Noah, taking all the pairs of animals with them. And here's what here's why that led me to thinking that way, is because I've been studying off the flat Earth topic, but in other areas regarding what the landscape would have looked like before the Great Flood. And it had to do with a lot of research into the Grand Canyon, because what not a lot of people are aware of is that the monument high altitude markers all line up to two constellations, which happen to be Orion and the Pleiades systems. In the three pyramids of Giza, the belt stars line up to those apex points, as they go. But in the Grand Canyon, you have 14 major monuments lining up to 14 major stars. And so the odds of that happening are 0.
Sure.
One
Yeah.
constellation, maybe kind of like winning the Powerball odds, but not two of them like that. So
Where are the 14 points?
Yeah, because
Well,
I've heard about the pyramidal discoveries and sort of the Egyptian discoveries in the Grand Canyon, but I have not been able
the
to
way
find
that
much.
works is that in 1909, the Phoenix Gazette came out with an article talking about how they sent somebody from the Smithsonian Institute named G.E. Kincaid, and they ran an article that the Smithsonian discounted. They just never, verified it. But what they found were Asian artifacts down there, not Egyptian. And that's because what was down there were probably the people that came over by the Bering Straits, the Asians that came down and settled in there. So,
Okay, yeah.
that,
And
that
yeah, we've
would
got
make more
Chinese
sense.
we've got
But
Chinese
to finish my
pyramids.
thing about if you don't mind, to finish about the study of Genesis in there, that in the King James version of the Bible, you get the PDF and do a full scan search for human space being, you're not going to find it. In a couple of places, they use the word humanity in there, but they don't describe us as human beings. That comes a lot later, and you do the entomology. I can't even say that word. It's too late. But you do the research on the word human, and you're not going to really find what you'd be looking for if it was written in the Bible. So in Genesis, they talk about man, and in other versions, mankind. That if you look at the word kind, it may have originally been thought or written as king, King, and that would be the gods manifested in their image in a material form, using all the elements to do this, to exist on this earth plane that was formed for mankind. But they're not talking about us. We then would be categorized in the animal kingdom, along with the other, the long-headed, the long-skulled skeletons that they found. They've got them in Peru and everywhere else. Would be other ones that had perished in this flood, because one of the species, us, was given the opportunity to do an earthly do-over, let's say. So it was a thought that I had to take and look at. Maybe it's a brand new Hegelian dialectic, but a profound one, to see whether or not what they wrote in the Bible had been misconstrued, or to mislead people into the belief that we were the original creations that ruled over the kingdom of animals and plants, ruled over the earth. We weren't given that. We were we were given the job after, the first ones failed, feasted from the tree of knowledge, we'll say, which happened to be the building of the pyramids, maybe. I don't know, but it was interesting, look.
Well, and one thing I know Kent Hovind talks a lot about is, how the Smithsonian in particular will find, these giant remnants, with long red hair and big red beards in the Americas and stuff, and or wherever, Peru, they find these giants everywhere, all over the world, and you have these big institutions like the Smithsonian Museum in particular, basically buying all this stuff up, and then you never see it. So they're basically covering up this portion of our history that it appears, and maybe you could talk on this better than I could, Ed, but it appears that pre-Great Flood, pre-Diluvian, maybe I'm not saying that right, but before the Great Flood, that it appears that we had stronger electromagnetic fields, higher barometric pressure, and richer oxygen content in the air. And so that allowed even insects and people and all animals to grow much larger and live much longer. And in fact, this can be demonstrated and replicated in a lab where if you increase oxygen content, barometric pressure, and the electromagnetic fields, all animals that have been studied grow bigger, live longer, and so you have the sort of giants. And so I'm not sure where your research has led you in that direction, but to me, it seems like pre-Great Flood, we had different conditions on the world that supported giants and even possibly dinosaurs, if they even exist. But now we just don't have those conditions, and so we are slowly obeying the laws of entropy and sort of regressing or getting smaller and not, well, we're thriving certainly, but we're not giants like our ancestors apparently used to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything said matches great with what Dr. Hovind teaches. Canopy theory, increasing atmospheric pressure. Oxygen was 50% greater. We know that from testing the oxygen in the amber bubbles. And then one of the biggest thing is there's a guy named Mark Armitage who has tested fossilized Triceratops horn and found soft tissue in the Triceratops horn. He's also found it in other bones that he's looked at. And what he's finding is osteocytes, which is basically the part of your bone that builds new bone. And he's found that like literally stretchy like rubber, and as well as this uh, what is her name?
I'm familiar because I believe she was fired for finding this live or malleable tissue, right?
Well, Mark was fired. He was a professor, a research professor, I believe, at the some university in California, and he was fired. But the lady who found it and in a big T-Rex bone, she actually still has a job, but she also said that she did an experiment where she took ostrich blood because they said birds evolved or dinosaurs evolved into birds. So she took ostrich blood, put it in a bucket, stuck it in her office for 2 years, and then checked it out 2 years later and said, "Oh, look, it still looks like blood. Therefore, it survived millions of years." I mean, what she did was a 10th grade science experiment, and then said that explains how it lasted for 65 million years. But what she should have done is taken that ostrich blood, stuck it in the Badlands of Montana, where it goes through the freeze and thaw cycle, is exposed to rodents and small bacteria and stuff, and then see if it's like that after 2 years. And I would say it would be almost unrecognizable. Mark Armitage even says that dinosaur tissue, for it even to last 4,000 years, like we claim on the creation viewpoint, he says even that is a stretch for soft tissue to last that long. And people give him a hard time just for saying that, because they'll say, well, because it weakens his argument. And he says, no, I'm just being honest with what we're given.
Right, right. Well, and I think that after something like, I don't know, 500 years or at least 5,000 years, all tissue tends to just sort of disintegrate, and you don't have any sort of DNA left. But
Yeah.
didn't they find some tissue that may have been DNA rich? In,
Yeah, yeah, they found tissue that they think they might be able to take some DNA out of, um, which is very, very surprising, and very interesting. And I'm not 100% sure on all the details on that, but Mark Armitage is probably one of the most kindest gentlemen. I mean, he looks like a um, Santa Claus, if you would, and you can go to his YouTube channel. He posts stuff on there. I mean, pretty much once a week, once every other week, on his finds and shows the videos. Very informative, brilliant guy. So definitely recommend if you have any questions on dinosaurs and soft tissue to check him out. I'm trying to get with Dr. Hovind to pay for him to fly over here and do some videos with us, just because it might be a selfish reason, but I just want to talk to the guy, pick his brain for a while.
Yeah, he's one of the best, and you know, I hate to, because this, at the end of the day, this is a scientific discussion. I don't think that we should be taking sides, other than we should really be siding with the ultimate focus as the truth. I mean, that's whose side I'm on, is the truth. And you know, we can have disagreements. Not everybody agrees on every last little point. But just one thing that I would just sort of beg and urge and really plead with anyone out there to do is to really look into this, give it a fair shake, get rid of all the assumptions, and just follow the scientific method and really, you know, see which one makes more sense, see which one meets your observations, and you know, if it's a spinning ball and there's proof for that, I'm still waiting to see it, but I'll gladly accept it. Until then, you know, I think that the ball is really in the heliocentric court to respond to many disproofs of the model, and until then, and the heliocentric model doesn't work. It's just a point to where I just try to get people to look at it, because, you know, like you said, when one is first confronted with this, it's the stupidest thing you've ever heard of. How can anyone be so gullible? Everyone knows the Earth is a spinning globe. We've known that since we were 5. But again, you know, there is something to this, and I just pray that everybody has a chance to see the truth. So wrapping things up, if you guys aren't familiar with me, this is actually the first time we've done a Wednesday show. You can find most of my stuff on the Morgile. You can find all the live shows on this channel here, the Morgile 2, and then I've got my tertiary channel where I load up longer videos until my copyright strike is through, which is Jonathan Christopoulos. So all 3 of those channels are linked up and featured sort of incestually on all my channels. You can also find links to the Globebusters and Jeranism. So wrapping things up, we'll just go down the list, and I think we've still got Ed, if you want to just sort of wrap up, and then we'll just go down the list.
All right. Well, I mean, I appreciate you guys being very cordial. It's definitely a hard thing to find for me sometimes with discussing, especially when people call the ministry. They start real nice and then they end up mean to me. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you too. No, you'd be surprised. I recently had a debate with 3 people who are Globers, and they weren't very nice to me at all. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, it goes both ways. So at least
It definitely does. So I'd love to thank you guys for letting me talk, and everybody being respectful. I really enjoyed it. I don't claim to be any kind of guru at all the stuff y'all were talking about, or any kind of smart on, you know, most of what the flat Earth model predicts or says. But finally, if the Earth was the shape of a pizza shape, and it's true, that's what I want to believe. I want to believe the truth before I believe any preconceived notion or anything. And that's really where I'm at. I just want to know what the truth is, and wherever that is, that's what I want to believe. Even if it means that I have to become an atheist and believe we came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. If that's the truth, by all means, I want to believe it. So, I mean, that's just my standpoint. Yeah, I guess that'd be it for me. I appreciate you having me on here, and I don't mind ever jumping in. If you just send me a text or an email, let me know.
Yeah, I'll add you to the list, and the way we do it is if you can show up to a show, show up. If not, no biggie. I've got about 20 panel members, and we average about 4 or 5 per show, so we've never had an issue with overflow. I think I can have up to 10. So maybe one day we'll have to fight for position, but so far it's never been an issue. But yeah, I'll add you to the list. It's been a real pleasure talking with you, and the feeling's mutual. I mean, thank you for being respectful and looking at this. That's what science is like testing hypothesis, doing experiments, and drawing conclusions. So I don't think there's any sort of angst or friends and enemies involved. It's just the truth. So we'll go down the list to Brian if you want to wrap up, say goodbyes, and what you're up to, what to expect from you.
Yeah, kind of wrapping up the little study you did with the getting the solar distances ironed out, and trying to probably do a video with you later on to give a update with the NASA Eclipse Challenge and where that's at with the different universities and the feedback I'm getting. And that's about it for now.
Awesome. Well, yeah, definitely check out the Facebook page, $5,000 NASA Challenge. It's got all of the research and numbers and charts and everything that Brian's done. It's pretty in depth, but the premise is basic. Eclipses, solar eclipses, should be very much equatorial or tropical events. And in fact, you find many polar events that are technically not possible on a globe Earth in the heliocentric model. So yet another one to add to the proofs. Finally, it looks like we lost Lee, so I don't think Lee's going to have a chance to wrap up, but I know you can find his stuff on YouTube. It's Lee Bracker. And Jason, it's been great having you on, man. Tell me what's good and what you're up to.
Well, I was talking to you earlier. What I'm going to try to do is get my friend who's he actually works for General Electric. He's a chemical engineer. He's also a scientist. I've been having him kind of poke through the numbers, and I want to get him on here so we can have somebody that is very strong from the science side who actually does. He works with large vacuums and tests. They build rockets. They do a lot of these different things. So I'd like to have him come in and give us, from his perspective. He has a lot of thoughts too about the Earth. He doesn't believe that the sun is powerful enough, based on where they say it is, to basically breed life on this planet. That the life is being bred basically from a force inside of the planet. He has a lot of really, really good ideas. He had other friends that tried pushing him towards the flat Earth model. He never wanted to go there. And a few weeks ago, I kind of went to him, and based off a conversation you and I had, John, where you were telling me, if we can get one person or this person, maybe the next person, maybe we can push the model a little further. And I thought, who better than somebody who I ultimately have a lot of respect for, who I find to be one of the smartest people I know. If I can get him on board, or if I get him on board and he can prove it to be a globe, then no what better than to have somebody like of that in my where I think as an intelligence level, this guy could really bring a lot to the table. So I hope to try to get him in here and bring some of that perspective. So that's what I'm working on. I'm also going to work on this summer. When I talked about being out on the lake and being able to see these things at 23 miles away, I actually want to do some filming on clear day and see if I can actually do something like what Jaron did with a laser, where I can get somebody downtown and try to see if we can shoot from a high distance and see if we can prove that out and actually try to prove some of the stuff in the field.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. And yeah, your friend that works for General Electric is absolutely welcome on the show. Globe
Does he
Earther.
work on rockets that can land on barges too?
Yeah, that SpaceX thing was something else, I'll tell you.
Oh my gosh.
To me, that backwards rocket landing proves a stationary Earth very clearly, but maybe we can talk about that on the next one. But yeah,
it's pointing at 80 degrees, about 20 feet off the launch pad.
Yeah, but yeah, so you could just forward, Jason, I send you the invites whenever your friend's ready, whether it's next week or 2 months, God willing, then we'll have him on. And yeah, absolutely. So with all that being said, I think everyone's had a chance to wrap up, and it's been a great show. Again, this was the first Wednesday episode, so not the volume of live listeners that we typically have on Saturdays, but I really want to thank all of you, all of the audience and panel members for sticking throughout. It's been a long show, but I think we had a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground. We had a surprise guest. It was a real pleasure having Edrique on. Again, he works with Dr. Kent Hovind, so maybe, just maybe, we can get one of my personal heroes, Kent Hovind, to look at this under a little bit different light, and maybe he will find some validity in this, I pray. But other than that, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. As I always say, what is it that I always say? Be here or be spherical. No, I'm not going to say that anymore. I'm going to say thank you guys all so much for joining us. Spread the word, spread the world, and peace out.